Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
We want to welcome you to our first effort to tie this topic down as more of a group event. We've been meeting a couple months, 3 months now, once each month. And we felt it was time to broaden that circle out. So the forum is the result. So the first thing we want to do is go around and just everybody say their name. So just a little bit more consciousness of who we are, and maybe somebody you've never met before or something, so you can identify who you are. My name is Alan.
I'm David.
I'm Tom.
Paul.
Clint.
Alan.
Wall.
Dick. Michael.
Todd.
Todd.
Okay,
Todd.
go back.
Todd.
Roll.
Dick. Michael. Joe. Chris.
Mark.
Larry.
Stuart. John.
Bob.
Andrew.
Robert. David.
Jerry.
Ingrid.
Tom.
What we're going to do is try to stay on the schedule, but if it doesn't stay on the schedule, we don't really care. It's interesting planning a workshop or planning a forum with a schedule, agenda. The agenda is on the wall in the hallway. So at some point when you're breaking to do something else, you can check that agenda. I did this last night. There is something called group mind, and in tribal cultures, people visit these tribal cultures, and people sit around, and somehow decisions made, and the outside observer says, "Gee, I didn't hear much discussion about that." So the committee is really interested in forming this group mind for GBF. So it's not when you leave today that it doesn't end the forum. If you have a thought, please get it back to us, jot it down. It's an ongoing effort to conjure together and use our minds together to address this issue. So that's what we're trying to do, and I think we'll come out with some insights that we can all use, hopefully. So the first thing we're going to do, and by the way, the agenda is on the wall on the outside, so I just wanted to make sure. I didn't have enough copies this morning. We're going to start with a meditation, and the meditations, there's 3 meditations in the schedule. One right now, there'll be one right after lunch, and there'll be one later in the afternoon. This is something we've been working with on GBF, that most of our meetings, we hope to have some sort of meditation in it, so we pull these things together. The steering committee just at this last meeting said, look, let's start with a 10-minute meditation at the steering committee and end with a short meditation. And we haven't been doing that, so that is to remind us that we are bringing our meditation practice together with our life practice. So David, you're going to lead that. If you want any of these spots here, or...
Gee, according to this, I'm supposed to speak a half hour. That's really scary. It's much too long. So listen to me for a half hour. Who said it'll happen? The topic, according to this, the topic says, what does Buddhism say about relationships? Gosh, I'm not even sure what Buddhism is. I'm still trying to figure that one out. First of all, before I begin, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I think we forget, once again, that GBF is this incredibly unique organization that doesn't really exist anywhere else. And I think it's, once again, a precious opportunity for us to be together and to practice together. This, too, is practice paying attention to each other, paying attention to our lives together, being together in a way that's different than what happened a half hour ago when we were walking down the street before we got here. This is an intentional community. I think intentional communities have a great amount of power and a great amount of are very important in the world we live in. A friend of mine called me yesterday. His name is Greg Smoots, and he lives in Portland, Oregon. And he just started a group of gay people, a sitting group for gay people, meditation group, and a discussion group in Portland. And he did it because of us, actually. He was inspired by this group, by reading about this group, and also he was a friend of Eric Holvig's. And so they started a group, and he talked to me on the phone. I said, well, we're doing a relationship forum tomorrow about practice and relationships. And he said, I feel so jealous of you because you have that great opportunity. And we don't have that. We've only been sitting together for maybe a month, and it's never really happened before in Portland. So once again, we just forget that. We get very used to our lives the way they've been for the last. GPF has existed for 6 years now, and it reminded me that this is an important group and a very valuable group to me, and I really appreciate our practice together. This is really a huge topic. I'm only going to be taking a part of it that I feel I have some experience with to talk about today. You know, we live in a culture of separation. I mean, what happens to us in everyday life? We don't experience the culture of interconnection or the culture of involvement and deep involvement with one another very much in our daily lives. It just isn't what happens. We live in a culture of individualism. It's very important that we somehow make our mark, even though it may be very small. Sometimes that's kind of something that's emphasized in the society a lot, and I think that emphasis, not to put down capitalism so much, but I think that emphasis really is very painful and very creates a lot of suffering in the world and in our worlds, and in my experience anyway, and certainly in the gay community and every community. So I think right off the bat, we're coming from a place of, the society is coming from a place of profound duality, and so we always should remember that. And so in some ways, the pain we're suffering is partially because of the society we're living in. It's also because of our own individual, the individual causes and conditions that have brought us to this place, or the karma that's brought us to this place. So that's kind of the background, I think, for any time we talk about the Dharma and any topic. There's a quote that I really love. It's quite beautiful. It says, we have connections with each other that are more important than life and death. So we have connections with each other that are more important than life and death. And this means a lot of things. I think it's quite a profound statement. And I'm kind of going to use that as the background of my talk this morning. The other thing I wanted to say is it's kind of interesting that we're here in this place, which is called Keros, which is it used to be over in the Castro. It's basically a support place for caregivers of people who were helping others who were sick or dying of AIDS, HIV disease. So it's sort of appropriate in a way that we meet here, I think. It's a caring place. So we're talking about relationships. So being in a place where caregivers are supported is a good place for us to be. Once again, it's a space that can support us too in our looking at this issue of our interconnection with one another in all the various ways that it manifests. And there are many, many ways, obviously, many kinds of relationships. We were in the committee meetings, the relationship committee meetings, we talked about all the various forms of relationships. Well, it's much too big a topic to obviously talk about today. So I decided that I would talk about mostly relationships that I've experienced for myself. So something I know about. And I'm sure there are many other kinds of relationships, but stuff that's arisen for me in my own relationships that I think may be helpful, and apply that kind of to Buddhist practice in my own life, and I hope that's helpful for people. The thing I'm most interested in today, for me anyway, is the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and our relationships. I think that's really the most essential thing for us to look at and to understand, because we don't tend to do that in our lives, because there's certain areas of our stories and our dramas that we refuse to look at a good part of the time. What we do is we allow the crap to come up and the pain to come up around them, but we don't really look at them very much, because when we start looking at them, it creates such pain that we just don't want to. We just kind of pull back from that. It's perfectly normal. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, human beings do. So I want to talk about the patterns of attraction and aversion in our lives. And that's like really, that's the essential part of understanding our relationships and understanding in terms of practice. So how do we have, how are we invested in our stories, in our drama around relationships? And there are many, many ways, obviously. But I think in terms of practice, I think what's really important is that from a practice perspective, the Dharma doesn't treat any kind of drama in our lives any different than any other drama, though we do, as you probably are aware of. I mean, there are topics that are very difficult, or not topics, but emotional issues, for instance, that are very difficult for us to talk about, especially in terms of romantic relationships. I'm going to be talking mostly about romantic relationships today in my talk, because I think that's where the guts are. That's where the juice is. And we all know we can make lists and lists of difficulties that we might have in relationships that we've had in our own lives. What we want, what we're not getting, what we think we ought to have. The list of what our partner, if we want one, should be, what should look like. What kind of ideal relationships we might have in our heads, and then actually what we do experience, which is a lot of times no relationship, maybe looking for something like very, very intensely, but not really finding what we're looking for, quote unquote. Like we have this very detailed scenario that's not being fulfilled in some way that causes pain in our lives. So I'm just going to go through quickly some of the dramas that I think are really that we play out a lot in our relationship lives. And then after I do that, then I want to kind of look at the Dharma, how the Dharma treats those, or looks at them. One relationship story that gay men, I think, have, not just gay men, but I think it's a big story because we talk about it a lot. You open up any of the gay papers and that's what you see, is the beauty story. And that, for instance, says there's lots of ways of describing the beauty story. Everybody has a different idea about that, what that is. There's, I find this beautiful, and without this, I'm unhappy. If I can't possess this, I'm unhappy. And that may be, it gets kind of bizarre at times. There's that about an individual in terms of relationship, but we do that on a lot of things. If I can't have this kind of a car, or if I can't have this kind of apartment, or if I can't have this kind of furniture, if my apartment doesn't look a particular way, and it gets very subtle, because I think this is an interesting one. It gets very subtle because sometimes our ideas about beauty are pretty convoluted. Anyway, so that's one story. Another drama that we play out is the sexual sensual story. And that's pretty obvious. We all have sex drive. It's a natural part of being human. And that sex drive it has a lot of different manifestations. Some sex drive is to penetrate, some is to be penetrated. Some is to Tom Moon and I were talking before. Some sex drive is to pollinate. It's that simple. It's not anything more complicated than that. Males are built some males are built a certain way. And so it's kind of like the more the merrier. So that's that. There's that side to it, which is fine. But that's the way our systems work in various ways. Our physical, sensual, psychic systems. That's another story. And connected with that too, I think, is the fetish or fantasy story, which is connected to the sexual story, which can be really complex, and can also be can be incredibly, wonderfully fulfilling, but also at the same time can also be very confusing and troubling. So, when I'm talking about these various stories, I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying this is what exists. This is how the stories we create exist in our lives, and we notice them. I'm thinking about this as pretty neutral. We could talk about how they may or may not create pain, or how they may or may not create aversion or attraction later. There's also the intimacy story, which is another drama. We don't really want to think about this as a drama. I think we really want to think about this as really something that we deserve as human beings. I need to be loved. I need to love. I deserve this. This is what should happen for human beings. This is the appropriate way to be in the world. And if I don't have this, I'm not a whole person. And I'm not a good person, quote unquote good. I'm not complete, whatever. This is a big story. This is probably the biggest story, I think, especially for people that have done some work on themselves. I think this is the most difficult one. Also, the need to be close to another, the need to hold, the need to be held closely, to be comforted, for a certain amount of affection, warmth, a certain caring. Also, the need to be vulnerable is another part of that story, that drama. The need to open to another and have another open to us. This story is probably, to me anyway, in my experience, this is probably the most difficult story for me. I don't know what your experience is. The one that I've had the most difficulty with in my life. Because I think it gets us in a place where we're so open that where we're so vulnerable or whatever, that sometimes even talking about it, we're not able to talk about it at times because it's such a great need. But I think it's really probably the most important one. I mean, to me anyway, once again, I'm talking about my own experience, it's the most important one for me to have to look at in my own practice. I mean, who wants to dump being loved and loving, right? I mean, who wants to see through that? It's such a wonderful romantic story. We want that one. So there are a lot of other dramas that we have in our lives, but I just took those off the top of my head because I think they're the ones that we, in terms of romantic relationships, I think they're the ones that that are important and the ones that really touch us, that have touched me. And if you don't agree with this, it's perfectly fine. I mean, it just happened to be something. I'm just talking out of my own experience and not putting a sound on one or the other, or the reasons why we do what we do. I did want to talk a little bit about. I'm trying to watch my time here. See, would somebody keep my time down? I'm watching it, but I'm kind of getting spaced out here. I want to talk about a drama, one of my dramas in my life that I think might be helpful for people. That's been a real problem for me my whole life. It's been a very difficult area of my practice life, and that's been for me, the experience of abuse, what we call abuse. I was abused as a child. young child, sexually abused, and some physical abuse as a child, psychological abuse, but mostly sexual abuse. When I was starting when I was about 6, and through my childhood till I got into adolescence, maybe. And it's an issue that has really clouded my life a lot, and I've had to work on a lot in terms of sitting with that and practicing with that. And so I was abused by family members, by Catholic priests, by here in the city actually, by CYO counselors, as a child. And I think that experience, in some ways, made it easier for me to have lots of sexual relationships as I got along, because I wasn't kind of afraid of sexuality. It's like I was introduced pretty early, so I didn't find it difficult at all. In fact, I was pretty into it. So throughout my adolescence and college years and through my 20s, and also there's a different time, in the 70s I was pretty out there, like many people who remember the 70s may or may not have been sexually. But I think that experience, those early experiences of abuse, really made it difficult for me to be intimate when it came to relationships. Though I was able to be, I think it caused me a lot of pain in trying to find that place where I could trust people because of the abuse. People that really maybe would care about me for myself rather than for having sex with me or manipulation or whatever. So the story of abuse is in me, right? This drama. I think I am this. So for me, working with that drama means, from the point of view of the Dharma, means really understanding that in an intuitive fashion. It means really understand. For a long time I didn't look at it. I really ignored it. I wouldn't deal with it. But it came up a lot in my meditation practice all the time. I was finding it coming up constantly. I couldn't sit for more than 2 minutes without it arising, which tends to happen in meditation for people who've done some meditation. Whatever you're trying to run away from, you can be certain it will arise in meditation, especially if you're doing long-term meditation. So I was in a monastery, and all I'm thinking about is being abused. And I said, well, this isn't something this is spiritual life. And so I went to my teachers at the time, and we were doing formal practice interviews, and so I'd bring that to my teacher. I'd say, sitting there, and I'd say, I've been crying for the last two or three periods, or more, all morning meditation. He'd say, well, what are you crying about? And I said, I was abused as a child. And he said, oh, good opportunity. Ring the bell. Get out of here. This was Katagiri Roshi. I don't know if anyone remembers Katagiri Roshi. He's dead now. Wonderful teacher. What I had to do was really look at and become friendly with this abuse, which is, in our society, really sort of anathema. But to me, that's the core of Buddhist practice, is to become so familiar and so friendly and so one with the pain, the story that we've created, so that we realize it is just that. It is just this big story. It's not real. Our ideas and our feelings about what are arising, about how things have to be, is all made up. Now, these are our ideas and our feelings. The reality happened. I was abused, because of causes and conditions, because of karma. That's why. I'm not saying that this little 6-year-old was deserving of pain and suffering necessarily, but then again, maybe he was. Because he isn't just this 6-year-old at that particular time. There's causes and conditions that have existed for forever long that have created the situation where that 6-year-old is where he is at that point. So it's hard for us to get that sometimes, because we hate to see people in pain and suffering. But unless we really, unless we really acknowledge and stay with the thing that we can't look at in our relationships. And I don't know what your relationship stories are. That's one of the reasons we're here today, I think, and I think it's a wonderful topic to talk about. Our relationship stories, our drama, our our patterns of aversion and our patterns of attraction. I think is a really essential story to be clear about. And we don't necessarily have to go into it like in a therapeutic sort of way, but I think we have to look at it very, very profoundly and very completely. In Buddhism, one of the things they say is that no rock left unturned. It's just like therapy in a way. You can't run away from the thing that's causing the most pain, even though it may be difficult in any given moment. So our job as practitioners who are doing practice, and I'm going to say this in the widest possible way, including everyone's practice. I presuppose that everyone here has a practice of some sort, and that my practices are meditation and mindfulness practice. Other people have chanting practice. Other people have whatever it might be, doing guru practice or empowerment practice, lots of different practices in our traditions. But that when we're doing those practices and that stuff is arising, the powerful stuff, the most powerful stuff, is still just thoughts and feelings. And that gets me to how the Dharma treats all attachment or all desire exactly the same. So if it doesn't treat my abuse as a child any differently than it treats something what we might consider much more mild or more lightweight, maybe. I don't like broccoli. Oh, that's such a tough one. For instance, that's an aversion, but it's not a very big aversion. So, how can I deal with that? So I said before, it's important to become familiar with our relationship story, or our relationship drama, through practice, whatever our practice is. And the next part of that would be we become compassionate with that. As you practice, the more you kind of intuit, and this is really intuition, because Buddhist practice is really about intuition. The more we practice with that stuff, the toughest stuff, the more compassionate we become, because the more we realize that this isn't us having this experience. This is profound human experience that's existed for centuries. Human beings have always had these experiences. And great teachers have tell us all the same. They all say the same thing. This is what happens. This is the process. It ain't so easy. I find Buddhist practice extremely difficult, actually. I mean, some people don't have that experience, but I find it very difficult. I find it very difficult to get down on the cushion every day and sit and watch stuff arising. I don't find it so easy. I've always got to be strong with it and be steady with it and be solid with it. Otherwise, I'm a very undisciplined person and I won't do it at all. I just as soon stay in bed and so in our practice, looking at this big issue, whatever it may be in our lives, or as it's arising, it's okay to go ahead and go through the feelings that arise with it. So it's okay when I'm thinking about my abuse to be upset by that sometimes. Sometimes I find myself being very upset when I see it on television. If I see, like, there was a priest up in Sonoma or somewhere up in Santa Rosa who was abusing children. I saw that. It's very hard for me to watch that. But I think it's very important that I do watch that and go through all the feelings with it and just get into it, and say, oh yeah, it's tough, it's hard. But I'm still alive, I'm still doing fine. And not being attached to it, but experiencing it. And that's an important part of practice. So we need to go through the pain of the drama of the story, and also at the same time, which I haven't talked about very much, is the joy of the drama too. There's that whole side too, which I've not really touched today, but I'm sure we can talk about it. I have a relationship, and it's a wonderful relationship, and sometimes it's very high, and sometimes I'm very attached to it, and I don't want to see it end. So I do a lot of really weird things to keep it together. That's another whole part of which we haven't talked about. Same game, though. It's the same. How the Dharma deals with it is the same way. It's still an attachment, because the reality is it's not going to last forever. My partner is going to die. I'm going to die at some point. Or we may split up. That's another thing that may happen. It's happened to me, obviously, in other relationships. So that's another. So you don't want to hold on too much to that. Just stay with it moment after moment, and don't worry about what the outcome is. So the last thing I want to say is, before we break, is I think it's important when we're talking about relationships to not have detailed mental plans about how things are supposed to be around them. And that's our tendency, is to see, you meet someone and you say, oh, you can feel it. Oh, I want this, This is great, or it's interesting, or it's hot, or it's whatever's going on, whether it's sexual or not sexual. I'm really attracted to this person, so something's pulling me in. And to right off the bat, kind of just realize that right off the bat and say, now I'm starting with the mental process of, where is this going to go, right? Is it going to be, I can feel it already. This is really something. We're really connected. I can feel it. It's really strong. And rather than doing that, just staying with what's happening moment after moment, rather than doing detailed mental plans. Detailed mental plans are not the way of the Dharma. Moment after moment arising is the way of the Dharma. So rather than judging the situation and hoping it's going to get to some other state, just enjoying where it is. Whether that's meeting somebody at Blow Buddies, a sexual, in a purely sexual situation, which we've referred to as anonymous sexuality or archetypal sexuality. In that situation, or whether it's meeting someone at a party, or it's whatever it is, just being aware of that, I think is what a dharmic response is to that situation. Just saying, there I go, doing that thing. So that's, once again, being familiar with that as it arises, that tendency to do that. And finally, I want to say that the ultimate practice, the reason why we practice ultimately, rather, is that we want to be clear about who we are and what we're doing here. I mean, that's our fundamental practice, is just to be fully where we are and not creating some very complex future where we can be certain we will suffer because it's not going to be the way we want it to be. So it's more like wanting what we get rather than getting what we want. Wanting what we get rather than getting what we want, which is difficult, I think, not so easy because of our wonderful plans. And ultimately what happens in the Dharma when we practice for a period of time is that we start beginning very slowly to understand our deep connections with one another and the world as it is. And out of that deep connection arises compassion. We've heard this before. This is basic Buddhist teaching, right? The most basic Buddhist teaching. And so obviously that realization of interconnectedness is what brings about wisdom, which is a state of being, not a state of emotion or thought. And being in wisdom and being wise means that we're compassionate for all beings because we have no other choice, because we realize that we're all in it together, all of us here in this room. Right? So that's pretty much the reason, that's pretty much the basis, I think, for our relationships, that we're intimately connected with one another. Whether we know it or not, whether we realize that or not. And that's kind of the foundation, I think, for all relationships, whether those are friendships, whether they're romantic, whether they're meeting people for archetypal kind of sexual experience, whatever. That's the background of all of it. So if you want a relationship, if you really want a relationship, it's practice. Because when you practice, you can understand that connectedness so much better, and you don't have any detailed plans about it, that it's going to end up a certain way. And so you'll be very surprised, because you'll really meet somebody. You might meet somebody that might not be your great fantasy, but it will be the person that will really help you in your practice. That's what I found anyway. Practicing really opens up all kinds of stuff. And once again, I've been emphasizing just romantic relationships, but you can actually extend this to a lot of other relationships too. So this is also a rah for relationships, or for practice and relationships. So please continue to practice. And then you'll have relationships. How's that? Quid pro quo. Okay, so that's it. I think I've done enough. Sorry.
You did a half hour.
Oh, I did a half hour? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And now we're going to do something else.
We decided to try triads, which is 3 people getting together to talk about what David has talked about. What take on your relationships, what's your story, what's your narrative. Share what you can or what you need to, and then try to apply whatever Buddhist principles you can apply. So we have enough people, I think, for nine triads. So if we just count off 1 to 9, and the 1 and 2s meet in this room, probably 1, 2, and 3 in this room. This is a bigger room. 4 and 5 in the other meditation room. 6 and 7 either in the hall. Yeah.
Maybe we should count all first.
All right. Good. Very good. I'll just start.
If there's a specific question.
Yeah. Well, whatever. It can go wherever it wants, but it's an open forum at this point.
I'd be interested in hearing from various groups and what was the primary stuff that came up.
Yeah, we were talking about one thing you brought up, the fear of intimacy. That's something that's really been on my mind all the time. Why are we so afraid of intimacy? What does it actually mean to be afraid of intimacy?
What do you think it means?
I don't know really. I really don't know.
Well, what happens when we're intimate?
I think fear of commitment, that's the same thing, We were talking about I want to be free, I want to experience all those things, and I feel the relationship somehow imprisons me, and I have a relationship where I still have my freedom to do what I want. I don't feel I'm missing out on anything.
You mean? I don't quite understand actually. I don't know how that has to do with intimacy.
Well, it's something I like to bring up if somebody else wants to bring it up.
Well,
I'm the only one who's thinking those terms.
What's intimacy? I mean, what is intimacy? What happens? What's going on when that?
You reveal yourself.
You reveal yourself. And you open yourself. What's so terrible about that? Why is that painful? Why is that hurtful?
You also change, and if you have a fairly concrete sense of self that threatens stuff, when you're intimate with someone, necessarily you change in relationship to that person.
So you might separate, maybe? Or you might...
Well, you would have to let go of your concrete sense of self.
You're rigid.
Right.
I think one concern is that if I present aspects of my personality that might be, by our society's standards, not considered attractive or desirable. I mean, normally I put my social front where I try to put my best foot forward, where I don't express my insecurities or my fears or my doubts or my unconventional desires. Where intimacy, all that stuff comes out, and I guess the fear is of being despised or rejected or judged.
I sort of think that when you think about intimacy, you're afraid of letting go because you'll lose control. Where the hell will I be? I mean, I'll be tumbling in space somewhere, and there's that whole feeling of being, no more. You don't have any moorings. You think that you won't have any moorings. That kind of fear, especially with men.
Intimacy and fear somehow go together, and I don't know exactly why, but it is fear of even being intimate. Just if you're intimate with somebody, you open yourself up to them, and they can do, they can hurt you in ways that they couldn't if you're not intimate. So I guess that's fairly obvious. But somehow fear, and I don't know, fear in Buddhism and fear in practices, there's something I'd like to hear more people talk about.
Well, speaking of fear of intimacy, from the psychotherapist's point of view, it's is you have the fear of intimacy because you have not prepared yourself for a relationship, and you maybe prepare yourself for a relationship in the wrong way, and because you are looking to please, maybe in my innocent view, you are looking to please the other person so much so that he can love you for the person you want him to love, and you sort of lose a sense of yourself, and so as a result, subconsciously you're afraid of him getting to know you more as a person who you really are, because you might feel fear that once he gets to know you, you have weakness, you have vulnerabilities, you have a lot of other not so good side of you. You don't want that person to know. And once you invest yourself in this relationship, but if you're still trying to hide certain aspect of you because of fear of losing that person's love, because the motive, the drive is for that person to love you, then you think that will make you happy, because it's all very false belief. And when you apply Dharma's teaching to that aspect, we need to understanding the concept of emptiness, and because all this compounded, and you create that fear in you without really understanding the essence and the why, and you seem to try really hard to solve the problem on the surface, but if you cannot understand the foundation that the fear is built upon, you will not be able to resolve it, because your motive might be pure and good to have the other person to love you, but on the other side, you create this fear without knowing it, intellectual or conceptually, or and so you do things that actually might hinder the relationship, and you don't know why, and you hate yourself for doing that, and of course you come up with a lot of explanations, but I think fear of intimacy is because you were not honest with yourself going into a relationship, and then you create a problem for yourself.
I agree with everything that everybody's saying. I think maybe something what brought this up is, I think so many people, the term is used so loosely now in therapy, and everybody's fear of intimacy, and all of a sudden it's the word of the turn of the century. And when I think about it, it's all those things that people are saying, and I think it's also, in addition, people feel like they're giving up, they're limiting themselves, they're giving up, they're closing themselves off to opportunities, and they create this sort of world that, there's going to be no more boys, there's going to be no more going out. Do you know what I mean? All these things are cut off from me now, and so I think they make it feel not attractive, because they see it more in the consciousness of it's giving up rather than enrichment. That's my sense.
I also feel that something that Dick said earlier of losing oneself in the relationship, and that's a definition, one of the definitions of enlightenment. You think about it. I mean, that's a great fear. But I don't think you experience that giving up of self unless you're doing some pretty solid practice. And so then you get some familiarity with what that is, what that feel. What's that feel like? Personality is not static. We like to think of it that way. We like to think of our personality as, I am this person, I go along, and this happens to me, and that happens to me, and blah, blah, blah. But really, personality isn't that at all. It's completely fluid. According to Buddhism, there's no such thing as this I that goes through time and space that stays constant. And so, yeah, Bob.
We were talking about specific relationships in our triad, and so I'll talk about something that's going on for me, and it relates directly to what you just said and some of the other people said, which is that the relationship that I'm in right now, I perceive myself as having this personality trait that likes communication, a fair amount of it. I like people to talk to me. I like to talk to people different ways. And the person I'm in a relationship with doesn't have the same communication style. In fact, it's much, much at a lower level than mine. He seems to have it's not a priority for him. And it always has been for me. So how does that connect with enlightenment or just practice?
You mean, how do you solve your problem?
You want a solution? No, I don't want a solution. You know that. We all heard that. But actually, to gain more perspective on the concept of losing oneself in a relationship, if we see ourselves as being a certain way, how much, when is it skillful to just totally go with whatever the relationship is moment to moment, and when is it not good for yourself because you're not being yourself. And there's part of who I am is I like to communicate, and I feel somewhat like I'm not able to, because if I'll stop. Yeah.
Yeah, what do people think? Yeah.
One good point that came out in our group, and Paul brought up, that sometimes, and about 8 months ago, I ended a relationship, and it's been pointed out to me by the spiritual people that I know that sometimes we choose a person not for that it's going to all work out and be wonderful and happily ever after, that we choose them to learn the lessons that we need to learn, and they can be very painful. And I just was thinking about that, because I just assumed that I'm going to get in a relationship, and it's going to be like Disney World, and someone's going to be throwing rose petals in front of me as I go through life. And many of my relationships have not been that. They've been incredibly painful, but I've learned and grown from them, and so I have to be grateful. I mean, if I choose to, and I choose to because it's too painful the other way. So it was a good point, So now hopefully that's the age where I want to, okay, I've learned from those, now can I just have a nicer word?
Bring on the rose petals.
Yeah.
Bring on Disney World.
Yeah.
I think the more you want Disney World, the more you're going to have problems with it. That's my sense.
Well,
that seems to be that's the way the world goes. The more we have complicated constructs, mental constructs, emotional mental constructs, the more pain we find because it just doesn't come out that way. It really doesn't. That's why practice to me is so important.
Well, I'm thinking now about reporting on the group. What I hear people talking about are having an ideal relationship, the relationship. That will be something special, and of course that's what I want. I'm hearing you talk about it. That at least that's a fantasy that I have. That's what I don't have, and that's what I need. And yet, and what I haven't thought about as a possibility, if I look around at what I have a lot of very nice relationships with men. I'm not having sex with them. I have a very nice relationship with a lot of men. And it could move to a new level. And I was wondering whether at my age especially, what might happen might be just some very nice relationships that just keep coming in and out of my life. And maybe not such nice ones either. They'll be teaching me. Rather than this issue, the model of it has to be the one that it will be it for the rest of your life. I mean, I don't know about that. I've had that. Just thinking. That's what I thought. I'll stop.
In our conversation, it turned out that John and I had a lot of parallels, except that his relationship went apart and stayed there, and mine's going back together. for however long it's back together. I think that I can safely attest that the passage of time does not preclude foolishness. In case anybody thinks that by proper... Well, it came up in your discussion that if you did a not proper practice, then you're going to get this good relationship. I don't have any signs of that. And someone once said to me, or a comment, which I'm sure is not quite right, but close, that your real karmic relationship was someone who drove you absolutely nuts because you had to work that out or learn to love that or learn to accept it or whatever it is, and that all the new age stuff where our perfect mate is this wonderful warm fuzzy person who causes us no trouble is just a lot of crap. Well, I would like you, having spent 63 years doing this, I would like to quit struggling, and that would be nice. But what I don't know for myself now is where it's meritorious to throw in the towel and where it's meritorious to keep going. And I think what I heard you say this morning was that all you really could do was do whatever you do day by day, and it would go wherever it went, is what I thought I heard you say. And I sort of think that that's where I'm at in my relationship. I think, well, you know, we're trying to be more honest with each other. We're trying to do certain things. When he says, "Is this going to be forever?" I say, "I don't know." And so, what I meant is that, you know, you're in it, and I don't think you ever get an A, so you can go out and get the perfect form.
Respond. Some people have heard me express this opinion before, so I'll be brief. One thing we talked about in my triad was how we're force-fed from day one on this planet in this current lifetime about the only really legitimate relationship is a heterosexual, monogamous relationship where you only practice missionary sex. And some people might loosen those parameters up a little bit, but it spills over the gay community where it's a homosexual, monogamous relationship is the desirable relationship to ultimately attain. We fool around, but that's only because we're getting our hamburgers until we can get a hold of the steak.
So many quotable quotes.
You might want to rephrase
You like the meat analogy?
My mind is that. But one real challenge for me that I've been really putting a lot of my efforts and energies towards lately is to questioning that a one-on-one monogamous relationship is the ideal relationship, and that I won't attain happiness on this planet unless I'm in that type of relationship. I think there are some people who psychologically just are not tuned towards it, and I think that should be respected. It doesn't mean that these people, and I may or may not be in that group, don't have intimacy needs or are cold people, but just their intimacy needs and their ways of expressing and receiving love are different from one-on-one monogamous relationships. I think it's really important for us as gay, this is something I said in the Triad, whether we like it or not, no matter how conservative our mindset might be as gay men, some gay men might be, we are all sexual radicals just by the fact that we are profoundly challenging the concepts of sexuality in this culture just by the fact we happen to be gay. We may hate, some people may hate being gay, may resist it, may become log cabin Republicans, or whatever. But they are sexual radicals whether they like it or not. And it's just real important to seize this opportunity rather than try to fight against it and use it as a way to experiment on ways where we can have our intimacy needs met that may go counter to the cultural acceptable norm. I would, and again, I said this, one thing in GBF, I would like to have my intimacy needs met in GBF, maybe through those friendships or other ways where I can get just the same quality of love, just the same quality of intimacy and happiness through relationships that are not one-on-one monogamous relationships. And that's my goal. And it's hard because the propaganda is out there everywhere you go. You turn on a TV set, you go to a movie, you walk down the street, you read a book. Everywhere you go is romantic one-on-one relationship is the way to go. And if you don't have it, there's something wrong with you. And I really would like to divert my energy to being aware of that propaganda and to really buck it. So that's my point.
There was somebody who hasn't. Go ahead, Don.
One of the things that I talked about in my group is kind of like a cyclic thing that goes back to the Four Noble Truths, that being suffering, and the reason we have suffering is because of a craving, and that's because if we can get rid of the craving, then we can stop the suffering. But there's like need equals attachment equals suffering. But at the same time, we need intimacy, we need to be held or something, and that for me, I've never been able to like try to figure that out in a Buddhist perspective. It's kind of like in this cyclic thought that's that's running tail, running like chasing tail or something like that, and I don't quite understand how that can fit.
It's a really wonderful question. It's a really beautiful question. Can I just say something about that?
Yeah.
There's a difference between a natural need and an attachment to the need. I mean, holding someone and being close to someone and being intimate with them in that kind of way, and I don't just mean with a lover, with a full-time lover. I mean whether you're having stand-up sex with low buddies. And I don't mean hugging and either. Whatever the interaction is, there's a way of doing that, I think, that's not non-attached. It's possible. It's not some impossible thing. And that's what the practice challenges us to do. That's what Buddhism challenges us to do. And if you've had the experience of that, the actual experience, not the idea, but if you've actually had that experience of being completely present but not attached, it's the most liberating experience you can have. And that's what the taste of the Tathagata. That's what the taste of Buddhism is about. That getting that feeling, getting that realization. And that's why it's so experimental. That's what Buddhism is so experimental. So, I don't know if people have experienced that before, but it's a very profound. It's also a beginning point for understanding other parts of one's personality, other parts of one's needs or attachments, to understand the attachments, to be familiar with the attachments, friendly with the attachments. They cause pain, but become familiar and intimate with them, too. So that's an important question, very beautiful question.
A lot of thoughts, of course, but the one that I come back to is in this culture, our cultural history has looked at the things that have been arising in humans since before thought about it. This need, this felt need to connect, and this real human, real animal wanting to be too close, wanting to have intimacy. It's what a baby feels for the mother. It's what will cause a baby to shrivel up if they don't get it. So it's not something. It's like nutrients for a plant or something. It's something that, for it to be its full self, it needs these things, and it's a matter of health. But in this culture, we've seen that and looked at it and somehow come up with this idea that romantic love is this ultimate. It's a religion of romantic love, and even Christianity of the bride of Christ and all this imagery of relating to the other, and all that imagery in this culture is about that, and that is an ultimate thing. But I am beginning to look at it. No, the Buddha Dharma is a much more correct, to my experience, analysis of what's going on. And romantic notions have to fit within that context to make any sense. You deal with them in the context of practice, and then they're transformed somehow. I don't know if I'm being very clear about it. But to me, I don't want a relationship. I'm saying a statement again. In our group, whenever I say I don't want, that's usually means I do, but I slip away. I feel that a relationship's really going to, make everything peaches and cream. But that's just kind of a lingering thought now. It's not one that I believe wholeheartedly. I believe that the practice is making me happy. And I want to share that with someone. And I want to feel like I'm connected with someone intimately. And that the Buddha Dharma can exist in that relationship. I want to experience that. Just to see. Just to look at it. Just to feel it.
I strongly agree with David's words. That's all I can say. I just strongly agree with that. And I think we have, even though I haven't talked to everybody here, but I know that most of us experience pain and suffering through relationships and so on and so forth. And in my group, I heard stories that touched me, and it affected me in a way that I feel saddened that the Buddhist practice or Dharma's teaching has not been able to heal or help in the cause of in the root cause of all this suffering. And as we become Buddhists, we set a determination to pursue or search the ultimate happiness. And I think we agree that we also have the determination to attain the realization of what Dharma's teaching is about, like emptiness, selflessness, because only then can you experience everlasting happiness. And it's great and it's possible to integrate Buddha's Dharma's teaching in every aspect of your life. And so no matter what activity you engage in, you will receive tremendous benefit, and you will have a very realistic view of life and this life and the phenomena and the people around you and all the cause and effect. And it's possible to create a happy relationship for yourself. And if you don't experience that, maybe that's because Dharma's teaching has not been fully integrated in your life. And I truly believe that once it's integrated, and you will act upon it without knowing you are doing it, and you will harvest a great deal of goodness for yourself. And then you will not feel sorrow or pain if you currently not in a relationship or to that effect, because you know that you are already complete when you come to this world, and all this attachment to relationships or wealth or fame are empty. And but it's not to say that you shouldn't try hard to work with a good motive to enhance your life, to help others, and to create good karma for yourself. And that can include obtaining worldly happiness, worldly love, as long as you apply them in the Dharma's context. And then no matter what outcomes in my brain, you are still happy with yourself. So that's why I strongly agree with David's words. And if we can look into the real cause of your unhappiness of any relationships you've had, to solve the problem can be very simple and easy. But if you cannot forego all those attachments and the false expectation or exaggerated expectations you created for yourself, you will always experience unsatisfactory feelings. So that includes physical pain, emotional pain, and all those negative feelings. That's my point. But please excuse me because I have to go to the airport, but I'm really grateful that I have this opportunity to participate. I have to go to the airport and meet a friend, and I'll come back after lunch. So please accept my apology.
Go. Look forward to having you come back.
And actually, that's why I wanted to raise a question in response to that his comment about different people having different level of intimacy needs. But I think the fundamental question is, do we need a relationship to feel completeness in our life? That's my question.
It's a good question. That's a very good question. If I can build on something Cliff said, and also David, I think the seminal act is to bring the Dharma and the relationship question together. I think once you bring that together, then the Dharma question just give you the perspective, feed into all those things you're feeling. I think the worst thing to have happen is if you separate your practice from these relationships you're having, like treat them as something separate. Once you bring those two together, I think then you're on a path that you can deal with your relationships in the perspective of the Dharma. I think it's what Cliff was partly saying. Anyway, but you have,
I just wanted to tag on to what you're saying too. I have two things actually, and we're all built very differently, and we're all emotionally very different. And I'm a firm believer in bucking trends. However, there are people, I think, that buck trends to buck trends, and there are people who, in their heart, further believe this is where I am. This is what I'm about. And I guess I would like to think that there are people who are, into monogamy or into one-on-one relationships to making them work, that in their heart want them to work because they want it to work, not because of, society and tradition, the pressures, around us. And I'm definitely open to seeing how these other types of relationships can be formed. I always just have a question personally with an emotional component when it gets very complicated for me when I think of all these different things going on. And our group, just in terms of our group, I thought it was kind of significant. We were talking about the emphasis you made on moment to moment, as opposed to, say, in friendship. You meet someone, whether it's a friend, a regular friend, boyfriend, primary friend, or whatever, and you get to the point of where it's like, at what point do you still enjoy the moment? How long does the moment last? Do you say, okay, so it's like you say, well, okay, this is the time that I have with this person, and I accept this person for what you are, and da-da-da. And then at what point do you say, this is not really healthy for me, this is not really cool for me to be engaged in this negative, narcissistic kind of individual who isn't open to the kind of stuff we're talking about. So that's a question that we had in our group. Do you get me?
You mean you're with someone like a boyfriend?
Anything, friendship, boyfriend. At what point do you say, okay, because you're talking about moment, you take life for the moment,
right?
And at what point do you say,
when the suffering's being created?
When you suffer.
When anyone's suffering.
When anyone's suffering.
Well, you bring it up, I think. You talk.
Sure.
Our tendency is not to want to say the truth, right? Because we don't want to make people think that we're not valuable, that we're not any good, or we don't know something, or we're intolerant, or whatever the reason. We just say the truth about the situation.
So you bring it up.
You're driving me nuts.
And then the person.
Or I'm feeling.
Right.
I guess the PC way of saying it would be, I feel that. I feel you're an asshole. No, I think you need to bring it up. You need to say it.
Okay.
The truth. And our tendency is not to do that, right? Because we don't want to hurt the person, right?
Right.
I had a partner in a relationship. It was it was a pretty good relationship. I thought it was great, but he was having an affair with this woman, and he never wanted to tell me because he thought it would hurt me. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, right.
I said, yeah, it does hurt me. Go away, leave me alone. Take off. So I think that honesty, the most honest thing you can say, is the most. I mean, how else can we live with each other? I mean,
that's the way I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how.
Well, we were just
that's
a little bit
moment
of
to
conflict
moment.
in that, and say at what point do we say, oh, I accept this person for what you are, the moment, and at what point do we move away and say, this is.
But you don't necessarily have to move away. I mean, there's other options, There's other options. They're fighting over here. Say what? Yeah, I know.
I think these people are next. Although you really, that's directly hooked.
I was in the group, so
okay.
I just want to extend the point. So okay,
hammer it.
Not hammer it. Extend it.
Yeah.
So okay, you're in a relationship with whoever, friend, or whatever, and you state the truth. That's beautiful, and we don't do it enough. And then after the truth comes out, and you realize, God, this guy's such an asshole. Then, or they may feel the same that of me or someone else. Then, at what point is it okay, from Buddhist perspective, to say, I need to leave this, I need to part from this relationship? Is that not okay because we're supposed to be moment to moment with whatever difficult. We can learn from difficult relationships more than from easy ones, but sometimes it's too difficult for us to hang in there. So, what does the Dharma say to that?
But actually, how life really works? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't really work like at any given moment, then I'm going to say, well, screw you. It doesn't happen that way. What happens is you'll say something, they'll say something, you'll freak out, there'll be a tension, you watch because tension's all it's about. You say this, I say this, I have this reaction, you have that reaction, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll split for a while, maybe a day or two or three. You come back and it'll change, it'll become something else. And then you work with that. That's what it means being in the moment. Then you work with that situation to see where that goes. Because it's not some final thing that you have figured out in your head and he has figured out in his head. See the difference? There's a difference in that than saying, this is what it's going to be and it's closed. No more discussion. The process is constantly back and forth, and it will resolve itself. I guarantee you it will if you stay with it and take care of the situation. It will. Sorry, I'm preaching.
David and then Jeff.
Well, yeah, I think I totally agree. And what I think you begin to notice when you're dealing with people that you think are moving in circular tracks, I think maybe we're talking about that, but it's just not changing. This, oh God, this is again, and you feel like you're bound with a chain, with a link to something that is not moving. But really, if is the case, then that person in that respect is really like an object in like a chair or something. You know, they're not a alive thing, or that part of them isn't alive. It feels that way to you.
Right.
But I think if you really notice, I mean, I've noticed in my friendships where I think that's going on, if I really persevere, you do see there is a change. It may be to you a minuscule change, but there's a spiral. It's not a circle anymore. There's a spiral, and the next time around that, you can influence that person, or they can influence you, you know, because you have your own circulating patterns too. So I think that's what we work with each other, is that place where we're going hibbity. You know, the thing's out of gear and it's not moving anywhere. You can engage the person and get them to move somewhat, and that could be through conflict, or it could be through caring, or it could be through
making love.
Making love.
I think making love works really well when you're in a tension situation.
But I think that's that what you think? But that's how we make people. That's how an organic thing looks like a rock. You know, it really, we are alive. Well, rocks go on.
According to Dogen Zenji.
Yeah. All right, so let me go to Jeff and then
Jeff.
I just want to speak to what Bob and I don't know your name.
Michael
was talking about. I think you can, in the moment by moment, set healthy limits, and moment by moment, in the moment, leave a situation also. I don't think there's anything in Buddhism that says you're committed to staying in an unhealthy situation forever in the hopes that you can fix it or create it in a positive way. Sometimes the most positive, in the moment thing to do is to leave the situation like that, or set really healthy limits.
Yeah, I don't have a love relationship now or anybody to make love with directly anyway. Just like that. And so the kinds of ways and the things that are sort of happening that are teaching me are relationships, like right now with a roommate and with other people as well. And what's happened with him, with me lately, is the need for me to speak directly to him about what bugs me about him. It's simple as he doesn't take the dishes out of the dishwasher. But then we talk. He also that's a fact. It's called his life. I know. It's terrible. But it's staying with him since you told me. But it's so hard for me just to say to him, you haven't done it in 2 weeks. And he said, and all that happened was that he went and did it. Then yeah, you're right. Mike's was going to be nasty. I went through so much stuff inside of me, and that's just a microcosm. I could do that in a love relationship too, and will probably, because it's, really, I'm protecting myself. I want to stay safe. I want to be liked. I don't want to get into an unpleasant situation where I could be humiliated and be made fun of and so on. So I'll play it safe and not want to jump off the 100-foot pole.
Right.
And I can see it anywhere. I can see it in lots of places, in the supermarket.
Is it helpful to take care of things moment after moment again, rather than waiting 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Do you think?
Yes, if I could only learn that lesson, I'd say, God damn it, you did it, and isn't it wonderful? You did it, it's working out, and now the whole thing is, and not only that, he's being nicer and talking to me more. Because he's been, sure, I'm suffering publicly, and it's like interesting to try to have a relationship with a sentient being that you live with, that you don't have a relationship, and you're not looking to make love with him, and you're not looking to have him in your life, and I believe tomorrow I wouldn't care, particularly. I wouldn't. I really don't care to have him in my life in that way. One way or the other. He's a nice guy. I like him, but sometimes I like him. Anyway, it's a teaching thing going on right there in those relationships.
That's right.
Yeah. I also have relationships with, for some reason, and I don't quite understand it in other ways I do, a number of young men in their 30s who are straight, who like to talk to me and be with me, and I like to be with them.
And I see teaching going on for me there in those places too. So I see a lot of it. The whole me comes right out around the dishwasher.
But I think there's exactly the same situation, even though one may have more emotionally charged stuff around it, or maybe not. I don't know. But I think you deal with it exactly because we have an idea in our heads that's going to go this way, and the reality never goes that way.
I want to play the same.
Right. Like, because if you can resolve your thing with your friend, then it'll be the kind of relationship you want. Well, it's not going to do that. It's going to be something completely different that you don't know what it is. Right? That's moment after moment understanding.
Is there another, Paul? I just wanted to say one thing, which is I've been thinking about during all this, which I think is heresy, perhaps, and I'm throwing off for the rest of the day. The best I can come up with is that I try to do the best I can in the free fall. I mean, when I'm not ahead and when I'm not behind. And when my partner says you haven't emptied the dishwasher, I want to say, fuck you, I've been doing other things all day. You never emptied the dishwasher. It's your turn. Mm-hmm. However, I got that out of the way. So there. Empties and the dishwasher fillers. Once we get that straight, but I think that I also cannot... That's an illusion for me to believe that if I studied enough, if I studied the Dharma enough, everything would be swell. I think that's just as much an illusion as the rest of it. Right. I think the Dharma helps me to persevere and hold out when everything else has fallen. And that happens frequently. But I also know that the insight, thank God, is ongoing. But when people say, "Are you a Buddhist?" I say, "I'm not sure that I am." It's because I don't have the feeling. I've never gotten the feeling that I've never been one of those people who is really perceived as fortunate, where I say, "That's it. We've got that feeling. By God, it's right. We'll learn the rules. We'll do it. Everything will go swell." And life, herever and into the next life, will be just terrific because we learned the rules and we're following them. Well, good luck. I mean, that hasn't happened to me. And I don't think it's going to happen to me. And so I think that I'm going to have to do the best I can in the moment. And things like this are really wonderful because people make observations which I can use in some other moment. But I have to say that I don't really think they'll ever get it right. Among them, those people are Tom Moon, who is a psychotherapist here, I believe. He also publishes articles in the Frontier, which I read last night. And he's going to start first. And then I will introduce Mark Marion, and they're going to talk about some of their experiences as therapists with relationships.
First of all, I brought a few notes here. This will be what I actually brought was a copy of an essay I wrote. That's going to be in, I think, Winston Leyland's book on gay Buddhism to share. I'll leave them. I guess I can leave them over here on the piano. It's very autobiographical. It's my first year of Buddhist practice. It's about my personal struggles with what I call the Church of Mr. Right. You know, the religion of romanticism and dealing with loss in relationships. So if people want a copy, there it is. The other thing is I'm going to be presenting some ideas it's kind of a model, and I'll be painting in very broad strokes. You'll probably find that some of what I have to say fits very well, some sort of fits, and some doesn't fit at all, and that's what models do, of course. So if it don't fit, don't wear it. We don't need to argue about the model particularly, I hope. It's about self-reflection here. The other thing is, because of my own limitations as a public speaker, let's not have a dialogue until I'm done talking, because otherwise I'll get off the subject and forget what I'm talking about. So I'll just do my presentation. And my subject is going to be talking about the obstacles to intimacy in gay men. That's my subject. I think that what we really should do is begin by respecting the respecting what it is we feel and the depth of it. Homosexuality, at least as I've experienced it, is a hunger, a very deep hunger that is on all levels, animal, physical, emotional, spiritual, for a closeness with other men. Again, as I've experienced it, it's an ancient hunger. It seems to speak through me. It's older than I am by eons. And it's a force to be reckoned with. You know, I think of it sometimes more of as a force of nature. That seems to be a better way of looking at it than sexual orientation or these other tepid phrases we use to describe this thing we come into this life to deal with. We become aware of it, I think, very early. It's affecting our lives. Let me tell you a story from my own memory about just how early this and how powerful this all is, which will give me also a lead into the first obstacle to intimacy that I want to talk about. I'm 4 years old, and I'm sitting on the landing of my apartment in the Mission when the fireman who lives next door comes home from his shift, and he's bounding up the steps, this gigantic, sweaty Italian god. And I look at him. I'm 4 years old. And it's, just this, kind of feeling. Next to me is sitting Davy, his 3-year-old son, who's waiting for his daddy to come home from work. And it's a little ritual. Sal is his name. He runs up the stairs and picks him up and throws him in the air and grabs him and hugs him, and the kid's squealing with delight. And then he's, hello, and he puts him down and turns to me, and now it's my turn. And he looks at me. Our eyes make contact. And he pulls back. And he couldn't say why he pulls back. It's unconscious, it's instantaneous. He just, whoa. And he sort of pats me on the head and says, hello, Tommy. My immediate thought, if it probably not even conscious, is something like, what's wrong with me? We are to be gay. It means that we are men who have an intense longing for this intimacy with other men. And what we begin to find out before we ever have words for gay is that the very intensity of this longing is the thing that drives the object of our longing away from us. That's the sort of the fundamental contradiction of being gay for so many of us. That we learn that what we want, the very intensity of our wanting makes men anxious, fearful, threatened, disgusted, angry, makes them assault us at times. There's a very interesting book which I'll leave out too, by Richard Isay, about this whole subject of basically of gay men and their fathers, and how this whole dynamic plays out unconsciously when we're growing up. I'll read one quick paragraph. Particularly the childhood of homosexual sons is that the fathers often become detached or hostile during the child's early years as a result of the child's homosexuality. Fathers usually perceive such a child as being, quote, different from other boys in the family, from themselves, or from their son's peers. These boys may be more sensitive, I love that word, have more aesthetic interests, may not be involved in competitive activities, and may be more seclusive than heterosexually inclined boys. This may lead both to the father's withdrawal and to his favoring an older or younger male sibling who appears to be more sociable, more conventional, more masculine. Some of the fathers of homosexual boys either consciously or unconsciously recognize that their sons have a special need for closeness and an erotic attachment to them. These fathers may withdraw because of anxiety occasioned by their own homoerotic desires, which are usually unknown to them. So that's very interesting. I think that who we are as gay people starts to show up very early in life, and right off the bat, it begins to get us in trouble with the people we want to love us most. And most of this is unconscious. We don't even know this is going on. We start to learn it, I think, in adolescence, when conflicts with other men, other guys, begin to become a little more. We remember these easier, the stuff about being teased in locker room, being called a sissy, hiding out in right field and hoping they don't hit a fly ball to us, being beaten up. I mean, but we are, most of us, I think, have been in some ways oppressed by other men, other males. And so it's very difficult for gay men not to come into adult life with, on the one hand, this longing for love from men, and on the other hand, wariness, mistrust, often anger and bitterness, and withdrawal from men. That's the difficulty. That's the issue that so many of us have. I've never really met a gay man who didn't have some of this. Some more than others, but I think most of us have it. The second major obstacle that I see here is that we, as a result, basically, of what I just said, partly anyway, we are different. We see ourselves as outsiders very early on. We recognize that we're different, and in a fundamental sense, I mean, all minorities are different, but gay people, of course, are the one minority who usually don't come from their own kind. Right? I mean, if I was Jewish, I could go, and beginning to discover what that all meant as a child, I'd go to my parents and say, well, what are we as Jews? What does that mean? And there's a whole tradition. When again, to speak personally, I discovered I was gay when I was 14. I didn't go to mom or dad and say, well, what's that? What I did was I sneaked to the local library and looked myself up in the card catalog. This was 1962. That was bad news in those days. Homosexuality, see also perversion, psychopathic deviance. Bad news. I mean, that was not. I didn't. I love the word perversion, by the way. Stripped of its meaning, it is a very beautiful word. It sounds like it should be the name of a perfume. Want him, try perversion. Well, anyway, Don Clark has really described very well some of the difficulties that all of this entails for us. In his book, Loving Someone Gay, which is also, I would recommend, it's sort of a classic, and he has 6 psychodynamic generalizations. One, the gay person I won't read them all, but one, the gay person has learned to feel different. In the society which values conformity, the person feels devalued or worthless, even though they may be outwardly successful. The gay person has learned to distrust his or her own feelings. That's another thing we begin to withdraw from our emotional life as a protective device. We may have decreased awareness of feelings. We may feel alone, wrong. We may be the victims of depression, which includes some degree of immobility, and we're tempted, he notes, to dull the pain that surfaces now and again through misuse of drugs and alcohol, or even to get rid of the pain altogether through suicide. In other words, I think to speak spiritually, what the challenge is that there's a tendency, none of these things that I'm describing are in themselves obstacles to intimacy. They're just experiences, painful though they may be. But the way they become obstacles is that our hearts close up. The heart closes to some degree in response to these kinds of traumas. We become less aware of our own feelings. We become wary and defensive toward other people. That's how these things become obstacles. It's inevitable. I mean, it's that this begins to happen. It's important to remember that it's not the experiences themselves; it's how we have learned to deal with them, which gives us some hope that we can undo it to some degree. So we come into adulthood with all of us with some of these wounds of the thing with men, the thing of feeling different. And then we flock to places like San Francisco and other urban centers to try to be a community for each other. In a way, San Francisco gay community is a community of social refugees. That probably overstates it a bit, but not by too much. And in a sense, we're a community of outsiders. We're a community of people who have not belonged, who come to try to belong and be a community for each other. That's a challenge. Not only that, but the idea of a gay community is only about 30 years old. I remember a time in my own life when gay communities would have been illegal. There were gay circles and gay undergrounds and so on, but a community of men who love each other and support each other, that was illegal. And so we bring our hunger and longing with us, but we also bring our fear and our mistrust. So we bring high expectations and a lot of our own stuff with us. And is it any wonder that we let each other down? Really? One of the I did a lot of thinking about this a couple of years ago when I had an experience. I went to this what was called the National Summit on HIV Prevention. They held it in Dallas. And it was all these prevention workers from gay people from all over the country went to Dallas to sort of see what we could do about this second wave of HIV infections. And what happened was it became a free-for-all. We all fought with each other for 2.5 days. We were at each other's throats. And the most common word was invisible. I'm invisible. Nobody's seeing me. Nobody's valuing me. The young people were invisible because they were being patronized or whatever by the older guys. The older guys were invisible because they were older. The women were invisible to the men. The West Coast people felt patronized by the East Coast people who felt patronized by the West Coast people. And the people in the middle of the country felt that they were caught in the middle of this bi-coastal war and that they were being ignored. And the old white guys like me felt we were being blamed for everything. And so we felt invisible. Everybody felt invisible. Everybody. Where were they? So I asked, well, where's the in-group? Who's doing the seeing that isn't seeing me? And I began, this is how it's an interesting fantasy a lot of us have, that there's this sort of in-group somewhere of gays is one of the, who really have it good, and the rest of us are on the outside trying to get in or wishing or resenting the fact that we're not in. It's a very interesting idea. To feel outside is a very common gay experience, outside and wrong and different and not. It's a very, very common experience, and of course, it's very natural to project this outside, to blame. It's somebody else's fault, and the struggle then to be in, So of course, you see on Castro Street the effect of this, what happens when we're trying to be in, how gay men armor themselves and get these gym-toned bodies and strut up the street and give each other attitude, and how we begin recreating the very traumatic conditions from which we originated in the first place. The sad irony of it, how we do to each other what was done to all of us, quite unconsciously and quite inevitably, The other side, of course, is that this is part of the gay community too. That there's a lot that's good that's going on here. It's problematic, but there are these kind of gatherings too, and then there is a lot of love and affection and support that goes on in this community. But it's something to be reckoned with. We're in ferment here. We're trying to create something that has never existed before. It seems to me that one of the most common difficulties. Am I out of time? Oh, good. Okay. I want to tell you how to solve all this. So. Yeah. Well. We're an extroverted society. The solution to all our problems is out there. And I think that our majority religion is romantic love. Our real religion is romantic love, not Christianity. I know that I created out of my own loneliness and the rejection I felt the image of Mr. Right, the man who would save me from all this. Mr. Right is an Adonis, of course, and he's always great in bed. But emotionally, he will always understand me. Because he was specially created by God to meet all my needs. He is the lover, the person whose job it is to love me. He will always understand. He will always forgive. He will know what I want and what I need without my ever having to say a word. Mr. Right is mother with a big dick. You know what I mean? That's mine. I make fun of this because I'm trying to change my religion, essentially, because what I've seen is, having had a couple of lovers, then what you want is the right lover, because we place these expectations that are so incredibly unrealistic on people. And I do not mean to demean romantic love. I have done it a number of times. It's one of the great joys in life. I hope to do it again. The problem isn't out there, The reason these obstacles to intimacy are obstacles is because our hearts get closed. And that seems to me to be the issue. And that's the issue where spirituality and psychology meet. That the issue of intimacy for all of us is how to keep an open heart. How to open a heart that's closed and how to keep a heart that's open, And psychology and spirituality both aim at this state. In psychology, what we need to do to deal with these wounds that I was alluding to is to tell our stories. Now therapy is one way that's done, but I think what we need, here we are. We need the community. We need the gay community, which is this that we're doing now, to tell our stories, to heal from our wounds, to not have to always be out there looking good and strutting, or doing that, which we'll do too. But this is where the healing happens. This is where the heart opens. This kind of event, and that's the way in which we need each other. That's the way community is absolutely essential. If we're to really have intimate relationships, we can't do this alone in an isolation. So the fundamental question then is not how to find a lover, but how to have an open heart. The question I get asked as a therapist more than any other question is, how can I find a lover? Until they get one, and then it's, what do I do about this jerk? It really is, That old thing about George Bernard Shaw is George Bernard Shaw said there's two great disappointments in life: not getting what you want and getting it. It's true, because as long as intimacy is out there and someone possesses it and someone gives it to me and someone can withhold it from me, that won't work. It seems to me that one of the insights I had after about 5 days into a meditation retreat was that intimacy is the atmosphere of an open heart. Now, this phrase may sound like a sort of a New Age greeting card. I hope it doesn't. Because to me, it's the deepest insight I've had all year. I would like to think it means something. But that it really is true that when you do your work, when you are able to be vulnerable, when you know your feelings, you're not running from your wounds, when in meditation you are here and present and open, you're intimate with what's happening. Intimacy is your experience of life. That is what I have been able to experience in my own work and in my own meditation. So briefly, though, it comes and goes like the fog, and that's why daily practice is so essential. And so I think that's our work, is to open our hearts, not monogamy, non-monogamy, anonymous sex, not open, what's the right way to do it? Those are secondary questions. The fundamental question is opening the heart. I think that's all I have to say. Yes, it is. So thank you very much. Okay. I don't know. Are we asking questions now?
You were going to wait till after the two presentations because they're complementary, and we have some time for immediate questions.
Next we have Mark Marion, is a therapist from Castro, who I believe his practice is directed to family practice, dealing with depression, and I believe helping folks with HIV positive. I believe that, I'm not speaking about it, I'm sorry. I think Mark has also done a chapter of a book that's going to happen, and so Mark can have explain himself more.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to begin by reading a Buddhist fable that was, at least some people say, written or spoken by the Buddha himself some 2,000 years ago. And it's about a beautiful young elephant who lived in the forest near Benares. And as the legend goes, she was as white as crane's down, and her size and strength were so great that men who captured her gave her as a present to the king. And the king entrusted her to his elephant trainers to be taught to stand firm and to follow commands. But the trainers were harsh with her and beat her with their elephant goads, and one day, maddened by pain, she broke free from them and escaped. This elephant ran as fast as she could for many days, traveling as far into the Himalayan mountains as she could go, until she outdistanced the king's men who were chasing her. And in time they all gave up, went home, and she was free. But she still raced on, and although time passed, she did not reduce her pace or forget for a moment that she had been a captive once. Every time a twig snapped or a breath of wind rustled the trees, she dashed off at full speed, thrashing her trunk wildly from side to side. Finally, the Bodhisattva of compassion could stand her pain no longer and appeared to her one day and whispered into her elephant ear, "Do you fear the wind? It only moves the clouds and dries the dew. Look into your own mind. It's fear that has captured you." And the minute the Bodhisattva has spoken, the beautiful elephant realized that she had nothing to fear but the habit of being afraid. And she began to enjoy life again, having finally found true freedom. I love this story because, to me, it really speaks to our experience as gay men. As Tom so eloquently described, our experiences growing up are so much of being afraid, learning to be afraid of who we are, learning to be afraid of other people, learning how to hide ourselves. and in order to survive. And this kind of runs counter to the experience of intimacy and relationship, which is all about telling the truth about who you are and opening up. So we've got this real conflict of this heritage of a very deep survival imprint that says we have to be cautious, we have to be wary, we have to mistrust ourselves and others, and yet we have this longing to be loved just like anyone else. That makes that especially difficult. In thinking about this talk, I was thinking about both my experience of a long-term relationship of 10 years and also the fact that I do a lot of work with couples and do a group on emotional intimacy, helping gay men develop emotional intimacy skills. Because as Tom said, the question that comes up most often is, how do I find a lover, and once I found a lover, how do I make that love last? How do I make it real and stay alive and stay passionate? And thinking about, through those experiences, what are the biggest obstacles, what are the biggest barriers in the couple's relationship? And couples does not have to mean a lover. It can mean a friend, it can mean your gay family, it can mean your family of origin, really any kind of intimate relationship. But the two biggest challenges really are communication, which is finding a way to speak the truth, to tell the truth about who we are, what we're feeling, in such a way that a partner can hear us and understand it, and being able to hear the truth that he has to offer to us, because that naturally develops intimacy. And then the other biggest obstacle in the context of relationship is the fact that there's no experience or modeling of healthy male-to-male relationships. And relationships between men are going to be very different than relationships between men and women. And most of us, our frame of reference, for better or for worse, is our parents' relationship. And when you have double male energy, there's a whole different set of dynamics that are operating. And so many people actually, I think, kind of despair, and somewhere in their heart of hearts don't really believe that men especially can have a long-lasting lifetime emotional relationship, committed domestic partnership, marriage, whatever you want to talk about it, that is emotionally vital. I really, in my work, I'm less interested whether people are sexually monogamous. I'm more interested in, are they emotionally vital to themselves? Do they really put themselves first in the relationship emotionally for each other? But the key to being able to heal these things really lies in both individual members of a relationship. And in terms of individuals, the biggest kind of obstacles to allowing that to happen is self-worth, obviously number one, which is feeling lovable. And as Tom pointed out, that experience of distrusting ourselves, I think all of us have had, as children, feeling a mixture of desire, sexual desire, and longing for affection and acceptance towards another man or another boy, and then feeling their rejection of us. We get this core belief, which is, if you really knew who I was, you'd go away. If you really knew who I am, if you really found out who I am, you would leave me. So there's this very deep fear of really revealing our true selves, and yet that's the very, very thing we need to do to create this joyful experience of connection. Another challenge is the willingness to be vulnerable, which is sort of an extension of the first one, and is a special challenge for us as men, because, again, we have, along with no modeling of a male-to-male relationship, we have no modeling of being vulnerable, because most of the men in our lives growing up, did not self-disclose, did not become vulnerable. That's not a classically male characteristic in our society. And the last component is the readiness to engage in intimacy. A lot of people I work with like the idea of having a lover. They want a lover, is what I like to say. But in truth, they over and over make the choice, choosing freedom, independence, and autonomy over connection, commitment, and fidelity. They constantly make the decision of choosing their independence, their autonomy, and their freedom over relationship over and over and over again. And again, the basis of that, in my experience, is that same fear that it's just, the odds are just too bad. It's just way too scary to risk opening up to a man in that way as a lover. The biggest barrier to creating and expanding the capacity to love and to be loved, which is what we're really talking about here, is fear, obviously, fear in all of its forms. And the fear really comes down to unresolved issues from the original relationships in our lives, impacting the capacity to love and be loved. And the central intimacy fears are abandonment, violation, and engulfment. So abandonment, the idea that, if I love you, you'll go away, that we already talked about. Violation, which is if I let you close to me, that you will hurt me in some way. You'll betray my trust. You'll abuse me in some way. And then finally, engulfment, that if I let you close to me, that you will absorb me, that I'll lose myself, that I'll become subsumed into you, so I won't have a me anymore. And these fears generally come from our family of origins, from the original relationships in our life, for better or for worse. And as Tom pointed out, they're often relationships. They're often relationships from with our fathers, although they can also be relationships with our mothers. These unresolved issues express themselves in relationship, in a form in Buddhism, in one of the realms of existence that's called the realm of the hungry ghosts. And you guys may already know about this. Some of you are new to Buddhism, some of you aren't. There's five realms of existence. Some people say six realms of existence, right? One of the realms is called the realm of the hungry ghost, that has to do with the kind of a search for fulfillment that can't be quenched. And this is a description of the realm of the hungry ghosts by Mark Epstein in a wonderful book called Thoughts Without a Thinker, that's about psychotherapy and Buddhism. I'd recommend it to anybody. But he describes this realm, and again, all these realms from his perspective, it doesn't matter whether they exist externally. They're really about different emotional states inside of us. And he says, in terms of the hungry ghosts, these beings, while impossibly hungry and thirsty, cannot drink or eat without causing themselves terrible pain or indigestion. The very attempts to satisfy themselves causes more pain. Their long, thin throats are so narrow and raw that swallowing produces unbearable burning and irritation. Their bloated bellies are in turn unable to digest nourishment. Attempts at gratification only yield a more intense hunger. The hungry ghosts in many ways represent a fusion of rage and desire, tormented by unfulfilled craving and insatiably demanding of impossible satisfactions that can never be satisfied. So you can see how with the hungry ghosts, and we all kind of have a hungry ghost part of us, that this represents the unresolved issues that express themselves in relationship. And these wounded parts of ourselves lead to self-defeating behaviors in relationships that in fact block us from receiving the truly healing experience of being loved. In trying to protect ourselves from re-experiencing the trauma of abandonment or engulfment or violation, we in fact are setting up re-traumatization of ourselves, like Tom said. And I thought about, from my experience working with couples in the past and some experiences in my own relationship, what are some good examples of how that plays itself out? So in order to protect the confidentiality of clients, I sort of put together different bits and pieces of different couples I'd worked with. But I just kind of want to describe this so people can get a sense of how this plays out. There was a couple that I worked with not too long ago who was having a very, very hard time communicating with each other. And though they loved each other very deeply, they were feeling more and more distant. And one of the members of the couple was getting very, very restless and starting to go out and meet and not really have dates with other guys. They'd been in a long-term committed relationship for 4 years, but going out and doing a lot of things that made his partner very afraid and very insecure. And as we explored the communication issue of helping them talk to each other in a way that worked better, it became clear that there was that early trauma, that they each had the hungry ghost part of themselves that was operating in their relationship. And so I had them both talk about their families of origin. And for the partner who was restless, and even though he loved his partner, he found himself kind of doing a lot of exploring and testing the boundaries of the relationship a lot. He talked about a family where his dad and mom divorced very early, and where he had a lot of responsibility to sort of take care of his mother's emotional needs and take care of his sister. He really became what we call the parentified child. And so throughout most of his childhood and young adulthood, he learned to really defer on his own needs and feelings and to really focus on what other people needed as part of his survival. And that's the way he really got loved in his family and acknowledged, was by taking care of other people. And so in a certain way, his fear with his partner was a fear of engulfment, that there's really not room in the relationship for him to both be himself and also connect. And so he thought he was really going through a period where he was feeling his oats and discovering assertiveness, learning about codependency, but emotionally he really didn't think it was possible to have intimacy and have a separate identity. And his partner had an opposite problem, where in his early family, his dad had abandoned the family very, very early, and that was kind of the pivotal experience in his emotional history. And so for him, the core intimacy fear was abandonment. And so they got into this kind of vicious tape circle where, the one partner wanted more freedom and would test the boundaries that would frighten the other partner. So he'd dig in his heels more and become more rigid and more demanding, terrified that the restless partner was going to abandon him, which would make the restless partner feel more engulfed. And so he'd pull himself more away from the relationship. And they went around and around like this. And here are two people who love each other deeply, who have a long-term, very satisfying relationship, but are in fact, pushing each other away. And becoming aware of this, becoming aware of the hungry ghost inside of each of them, the longing for love, but feeling like it's impossible to have a sense of self and to have love at the same time, and the terror of abandonment that made the one partner actually push his partner away by clamping down and becoming insecure and trying to control the relationship. For them to become aware of this just brought the level of reactivity and fear way down and enabled them to begin to talk about what was happening as it was happening and really learn how to love each other. So that's one example. I'll just talk about one other person that I worked with. It's actually an amalgamation of a couple different clients. These are both very delightful people, but they had a pattern which I see a lot of being sexually attracted to emotionally distant men, kind of emotionally withholding distant men on whom they projected this quality of strength. And they would pursue relationships with these men and then be unsatisfied because, in fact, they found out when they got close to them that they were often emotionally withholding, a little bit distant, a little bit self-absorbed. And, what we discovered through working with them was that this was really playing out their relationships with the original men in their lives. And there was a longing to somehow reconnect with the distant father or the distant men in their childhoods and have them, if they could get that man over there, of all the men around them, that man over there who's the one who's withholding love from me, if I can get him to love me, then I'll really be healed and I'll really be whole. But in fact, they're choosing the very person who can't give them the love they need. And so, like the hungry ghost, they cannot get the nourishment that they want. And becoming aware of this really allowed them to look at what was happening and to explore what they needed to do. So we all have a hungry ghost part of ourselves that comes up and limits our capacity to love and be loved. And the question really, in terms of this, is what is healing? what do you do once you recognize this part of you that sets up a self-defeating pattern based on your own personal pain? What do you do about it? Well, the image in this realm of the hungry ghost, in one of the 6 realms of a kind of existence, or you can look at it also the 6 realms of emotional states, psychological states. In that realm, the bodhisattva of compassion appears with a bowl of fruit or nourishment representing the nourishment of the Dharma. That this is real healing nourishment that provides a kind of a food that really can penetrate through the part of us that can't really accept the very love that we want most. And I think for us, it really involves recognizing the part of us that is the hungry ghost, or I even like better the image of the white elephant, because the truth is that these parts of ourselves that we're so terrified of are not ghoulish. They're in fact very beautiful. But we have learned to look at them as being ghoulish and terrifying. And so healing is really getting to know the part of ourselves, the hungry ghost part of us, and not to be afraid of this. And through this, we can recover our capacity to be vulnerable, to open ourselves up to loving and being loved, and finding a way to tell our stories, to tell our truth to ourselves and to each other. When this happens, the very pain that seems to be our enemy can become an ally. This hungry ghost quality, this frightened white elephant, can actually help us create intimacy with other people we love. In other words, the very things that seem to rob us of the opportunity for love, our trauma of abandonment or violation or engulfment, can become the way that we genuinely open up and become authentic and allow ourselves to experience real intimacy and connection. And I see that happen over and over again with a real palpable sense of relief when people who love each other, whether they're partners or friends or whatever, can recognize, that hard, afraid part of themselves, can get to know their own personal stories and can talk about it. And I'd like to end with another story that I really like, which a lot of you have probably heard, which is a Buddhist folktale from Vietnam that goes like this. In this traditional folktale, they talk about the difference between heaven and hell. In hell, everyone is given an abundance of food and then given chopsticks that are a yard long. Each person has all the food they need, but because the chopsticks are too long, the food never reaches their mouths. In heaven, the image is exactly the same. Everyone is given an abundance of food, and their chopsticks are also a yard long. But in heaven, the people use the chopsticks to feed each other. And these chopsticks, these yard-long chopsticks, are that wounded part of ourselves. That with awareness, with understanding, when we can become the bodhisattva of compassion that appears to our own white elephant and says, you don't have to be afraid anymore. Nothing will hurt you like you were hurt before. You won't allow that to happen. We won't allow that to happen. When you can really do that to yourself, when you can tell the truth about your pain and woundedness, then you can really use what has seemed to be that block to nourishment as a way to nourish people who love you and for them to nourish you back. And that's it. I'm done.
We have half an hour for questions and discussion about
That's very good. I love that last story. Yeah, you're great. David.
I first wanted to just say how touched I was by both of your talks. Realizing once again how fortunate we are to be able to share practice together, share our collective wisdom. We don't think of ourselves individually that way, I think, very, very much. We kind of think, well, we're just plugging along. But actually, when we get together, it's quite amazing what comes from this group. I did have a question about both of your talks is kind of, I think, advice to both of it. In practice, in the Buddhist practice, at least in my tradition, it's important to go through whatever issue you're working on, to process through it, for lack of a better word. And that happens in a lot of different ways. We sometimes say you sit with it, you make it a part of who you are more fully, rather than run away from it. And I want to know from the therapeutic perspective how that would be different. Is it the same, or is there another? What is the style? What do you do? How do you help people? What's this? I mean, is that a clear kind of question, or is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the general idea is exactly the same. That the way beyond is through. That the purpose of therapy always is to return to where it hurts and to return to the stuff that, when we're feeling pain, it's natural for human beings to want to get away from it. And that's what, also what causes all the problems emotionally, is we armor ourselves and defend ourselves against it. So I think both spiritual practice and therapy are alike in that they both try to reverse that process and look at it, go into it, go through it, feel it deeply. And there's a million different techniques in therapy, but essentially it's the same thing. I'm very impressed, the more I get into Vipassana meditation, how similar it is to psychoanalytic work. Just paying very close attention to your experience. And the attention itself is essentially compassionate. Attention and compassion are the same thing. I've heard that's actually true. And that merely paying attention is so healing. It's an act of love for oneself, which in itself undoes so much that was done to us. Because I think when we turn from ourselves, of course, that's what happened out there. When we were rejected. If we turn from ourselves, we start doing this very same violence to ourselves that was done to us. We repeat it intracyclically again and again and again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the only thing that I would add is that I think it's really important to have a vocabulary or tools for understanding really what's happening emotionally, because you can sit and go over the same pain over and over again and be caught in that tape loop, like I was talking about with that couple. When they have a deep love and compassion with each other, but they don't have awareness. And a part of awareness, I think, is, and again, I might not be my Buddhist practice is just beginning, but that awareness is part of it, and then a vocabulary and an exploration of self-analysis is the other part, so that you can really go somewhere with it, so you don't keep, just churning around the same pain without, peeling away the layers and finding out really what's at the core of it.
Forming with the nature of pain.
Yes.
What do you mean about vocabulary?
Whether in the Buddhist sense, talk about the 5 realms, in this wonderful book, he uses the 6 realms as that's right. Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm not telling. But he talks about those as psychological states, and so you have a vocabulary for looking at what's happening emotionally, a vocabulary for looking at greed, looking at delusion, looking at hatred of yourself or of any other sentient beings inside. And psychotherapy provides another vocabulary, whether you're talking about inner child work, whether you're talking about cognitive behavioral, object relations. Those are just all tools for understanding. Although, as you pointed out, David, if you peel away enough layers, it's empty. There's nothing there.
But I think it is helpful. Part of the language is to be able to connect my personal experience right now with my own history. When I'm feeling my own hungry ghost feelings, hunger and this, got to do. There's this, tendency to go out there and try to. But if I can understand, or to the degree that I understand that it's related to these things in my past, like this experience I talked about on the landing when I was 4 and with my father and so on. When I begin to understand, it becomes comprehensible in a way. It's not so mysterious, and I'm less fooled by my idea that man over there is going to make it better. I can understand what it really is about, where it really comes from, and just that understanding helps me able to sort of bear it, sit with it, and contain it, without either running away from it or having to do anything to make it better. And I think in a certain sense, practice does the same thing. I was aware of some of this sorrow that I was just mentioning in a meditation retreat, and how in awareness, when you're really deeply into it, it just sort of floats in awareness, and it's there, but there's awareness all around it, holding it up, and that's a very healing experience to have.
This is really sort of something you prompted for me to think about. I'm sort of a retired therapist, and as I've experienced Zen practice, what we share, it's the role of the teacher. The practice teacher has become to me feeling a lot like how I felt with the therapists that I worked with. And both are a kind of a guide through the pain. To sit without a teacher is to go through hell and you'll just die. I guess, I can say, well, quite the same analysis for therapy, but in a way, for me it's been a way to make my life more compassionate. It's been helpful. When I was a therapist, it's even more helpful to me to be a therapist, to look at myself in terms of thinking what the people are going through. But I think there is that aspect of a teacher, someone who can help you get through this. It's important. I find the works of Robert Aitken very important for me, because he makes relevant in my life a way of understanding, the Dharma that I don't get from the Japanese, You don't speak to me that way. we can be the teachers. We have to have a practice teacher there who's designated by some form, but still this kind of contact without shared wisdom and common
I sometimes get a little confused. I have a lot of good benefits from psychotherapy myself, but in reading a little bit of Thomas More's Soulmates, he talks about being cautious about looking, we're not always recapitulating our family of origin issues. Not all our issues are always come from our past. Appreciating the mystery of sorrow and pain is part of the process of being human. So how do you deal with that? I mean, that's kind of confusing for me sometimes in therapy, when I'm dealing with certain kinds of issues of pain and stuff. And and I've dealt with lots of issues of my family of origin, and yet, some of this sorrow does feel mysterious and doesn't always feel like I'm recapitulating my family of origin as always.
No, that's very lovely, and I think that one of the false sort of judgments or goals about both Buddhism and therapy is that you achieve this state, which can be viewed either on one part of being sort of this perfect kind of creature free from pain, this sort of almost robotic kind of ideal psychologically healthy being, or that you can somehow find, total freedom from suffering. And, of course, there's a possibility of enlightenment and recognizing what suffering is, but they say, that, what do they say? Enlightenment is samsara. Samsara is enlightenment. So it's just, the difference between heaven and hell. So I think, it is always there. I think it is always there. And certainly, especially the sorrow aspects for us as gay men living in a time of constant loss. Many of the men I work with, their abandonment experience is in the last 10 years of their life. Maybe they had a little seed of it, like we all do, but, the reinvesting emotionally in a relationship is very scary when you've lost so many people you love. And even beyond that, there's just this the grief and the sadness of being human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk about depression or sadness at a very early age, and from the feeling of the family origin. And if this is unresolved, it can stay with you in adult life. I mean, it's like it's always there. Just by being aware of it, does this resolve the depression?
I think, as I was telling the story about this fireman, for instance, I was in touch again with the sorrow of that and experiences like it. That happened 44 years ago. And there is a certain... We will carry a certain sorrow with us for the rest of our lives. We will, That's part of it. That's part of being human, for one thing. But there's a sorrow that gay people feel. And I think, again, like what Mark was saying a minute ago, we can't expect that by doing our inner work that we'll be scraped clean of suffering, It's not like that at all. It's more like we have a new relationship, a more compassionate relationship to it. I don't turn away from that little boy anymore who was standing, I was ashamed of him for years, because he was a rejectable kid, Now, because I've done some of this, I can, I hate this in a way, this inner child stuff sounds so hokey and California-ish, but it's so true that there's a hungry lonely little boy in us that we all need to, and part of what happens from doing this inner work and the meditation is that you can embrace that part of yourself. And so you don't get alienated from yourself as much. I think that's the benefit to me of having done this work, that I'm on my own side. Not that I'm free of the pain of it. I think that the pain will always be there. But then what happens when you're on your own side? You're less overwhelmed by it all. Again, you feel it, but you contain it. The thing about depression that makes it really bad is when it's immobilizing depression. When you can't get out of bed, you can't move and can't live in the present. But we'll all have depressed moods. We'll all go in and out of it, especially in the AIDS epidemic. We have to live with some measure of it. It's just a question of not being lived by it, so much, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I would add to that. I think that in sort of something I didn't get a chance to say in my talk is, especially the second, combination of a couple different clients that I talked about, who was searching for the unavailable man in his lover. One of the important things was for him to recognize to that scared, little boy inside of him, that, hungry ghost, or that, beautiful white elephant, whatever it is, that, he is the man of his dreams. He really is him. And no, he will not accept, in fact, that part of him would not accept from any other man externally what he really needs. He's got to give it to himself. He's got to find a way to do that. And that is, real freedom. And that doesn't mean that without awareness you automatically know how to do that and do that every moment, but you always have that to return to. You forget and then you remember, and you start grasping externally, and you come back to yourself. And that is a wonderful freedom in that, because you know the path, even if you get off of it, you can find your way back.
I'm struck by Don's comment about finding a teacher, and especially the end where you said we're all our own teachers.
You're my teacher.
Yeah, well, and then you're your own teacher.
That's true.
And I was always very impressed when I got into Buddhism. I think it was Bodhidharma, maybe Dave correct me, but the main practitioner in China said, I thought a revolutionary thing that you can access the Dharma through meditation alone. You don't need priests and you don't need writings. It's a direct accession of that. So I think this does go back to this technique that is very ancient, but it does allow a softness to go around these painful moments, and you keep posing the questions to you. And in that sense, everyone has their own teacher available to them. That doesn't mean you don't look for teachers among your Sangha or go to therapists for expert teachers or find spiritual teachers. But if you don't have a relationship with your own teacher through meditation, I I think it's a missing link that you really have to have. To add, to then supplement the teachers on the outside.
I've had many years of therapy myself, and to some degree it's quite mysterious as to why it's necessary.
Don't tell him that.
But it is, of course, necessary. For me, there are times when I've gone to my therapist and I'm going to tell him my story, my thing that I need to tell him for that day, and I know, since I've been seeing him for so many years, I know exactly what he's going to say. Then I tell him my story. Then he says what exactly I know he's going to say, and then I feel better. It's very odd. One of our needs as social animals, I suppose, is a witness. We need somebody to witness our pain. We can't just do it inwardly. I don't quite know why that is, but the witness is really important for these things. Just have someone else.
Thank you, Mark. A lot you said. One of my questions has been answered, so I brought it up, but I was thinking about the issue of dealing with our grief and our pain and our story. And we talked about our story earlier from our childhood, and we all are abused in some form, whether it's physically, emotionally, or sexually, and all that. And I've heard that, and it's time that you got out of your story or over it, so you don't get stuck in your story. Like I was an abused child, or I was poor, or I was whatever. And yet, or in relationships, when they end, whether the person dies or your partner leaves you or you leave them, and there's that grieving period. And I've been dealing with a lot of grief in different areas, of friends dying and of a relationship ending. And I think the grief work is over. And then recently, in regards to the relationship, it all came up again. I did some work on grief last week in a Buddhist sense of where I live. And it just stirred it all up again, and it really upset me because I wanted to be over with. I wanted to be on with my life. I didn't want to be stuck in the story of I'm alone again, and I'm used to it, but this time it doesn't feel as good as it used to. And so it's that conflict of wanting to feel the pain but not wanting to detach from it, and not wanting to deny it, and yet it's just confusing. I don't know what place to be.
You should take that one.
Well, Tom is saying that because he helped me write a chapter for this book on lesbian and gay mental health, on sort of remaining passionate in the midst of global loss. Losing our community, losing our lovers, losing some of our sense of identity. And that's one of the sort of key theses that's very Buddhist, I think, is that grief is a circle. It's not a line. The traditional psychotherapeutic theories are that you start in denial and you end it in acceptance, and then you go on with your life, and that just doesn't really exist. That it's more being with the suffering, having a different relationship with the suffering, as it keeps kind of going around like the wheel of life, like the different realms of existence. And I think that's at least what Buddhism offers me, because I wrote that chapter because really out of my own suffering, because like you, I had lost a lot of friends, done a lot of work through HIV, lost a lover, and I was really sick of being depressed. I was sick of feeling like an observer to my life just because the loss was so big, and so, but it just there didn't seem to be a way to get beyond it, because I walked out my door and there it was. So, having a different relationship with it. And Buddhism, offers that relationship. And just, at least for me, in sitting, in, acknowledging the Four Noble Truths, and, the Eightfold Path, just surrendering to the experience of life and suffering, Ironically for me, as opposed to that being depressing and cynical, that's actually very liberating and optimistic for me. Because then my ego's not struggling to avoid, what's actually very true and inescapable.
Mark really helped me with this, with my grief, with this idea of grief as a circle. I began to think of it. It's the wheel of birth and death that we're in. I had thought until then, I went, these Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of denial, bargaining, depression, all that, and acceptance is at the end. So acceptance is home plate, and that's the goal. And you're doing your grief work so you can get to home plate, and then you've scored, and then things are quote back to normal. That makes grief an aberration, a form of pathology, right? But if you think about it, if loss is inevitable, and Buddhism says loss is inevitable, then so is grief. And grief is a normal part of life. And we're not bad if we're suffering from it. And there's not a time limit. I mean, people said, are you still dealing with that? Get over yourself, honey. Stop feeling so sorry for yourself. We're so abusive to each other when we do stuff like that. Stephen Levine said in one tape that I listened to, real grief lasts a lifetime. And make our peace with that. As time goes on, a loss gets less and less painful. But, the lovers, the friends we've lost, whenever I remember them, until I die, there's going to be some pain. And that has to be okay. So we have to embrace that, that we're not somehow failing or feeling sorry for ourselves or stuck in our story. I hate those kind of phrases. You're stuck in your story. You get off the pity pot. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. These are abusive phrases which we use. Get over yourself. This is another one. I'm going to make a list of these someday and let it call. They are. We are. That is not the way to talk to ourselves. We deserve more respect for our feelings than that, I think.
Well, I share the experience that we're all talking about of this questioning as a young person. I had a fortunate event in my life when I was maybe 9 or 10. I don't know how I came across this information, but that Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci were gay. And I thought, oh, great. I mean, they, previous to that, were my big heroes. I mean, I read books on them. I loved the inventions and the art and all that. And something that just, went down to my core. That, I'm okay. Actually, this sensitivity we're talking about and this inability to get over grief, this is pointing actually to a being that we all are, that is incredibly richly endowed with emotional sensitivity and caring. We just happen to be in a society that, I don't know where to begin with that. But, it's a possibility to reclaim for ourselves that we're not an aberration. We are important, vital part of humanity that's been ancient. Like you said, this is the glue that holds society together. Otherwise, we'd be straight people be at each other's throats. I mean, I thoroughly believe that. We are here because without us, the whole thing wouldn't have held together. And lesbians, I feel the same way. They hold together women's strength, and you just can't have two opposite sexes. They're gonna kill each other, or it just won't work. We are all needed, and we have been evolving to be who we are for eons, and we've got to just take that back up as our. It's okay. It's great. I feel very lucky to be who I am, and I feel extremely lucky to have found you wonderful people. Really do.
Yeah, I just have first of all, Tom, the point that you made about a small child pushing the father away because of the gayness, I thought was really interesting because it was a turn from gayness is caused by the distant father. It's the other way around. The gay child causes a distant father, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to make gayness a pathology that's caused from inept parenting.
Right.
Because I think a lot of gay men do experience, just from my own personal experience and also from talking to other people, distant father situation, and it's kind of giving credence to that old chestnut, and which is a self-invalidating viewpoint. So I was just interested to hear that. I have a question about what you just said, which I agree with. I think there's a lot of about get over yourself. There's a lot of impatience and harshness and judgment towards people who are dealing with issues that keep on going on and on. I guess my question is, though, can there still be a state where a person just is clinging on to something that happened that was traumatizing or painful, and just to the point where it's unhealthy? Where is there some way you can gently tell somebody to get over it?
No, that's not a gentle message. But I reckon your point. It is true that we get stuck in broken record kind of stuff, and you see people doing that, and you want to help them get out of it. And of course, people in therapy that do that a lot. My own understanding of it, however, first of all, people do not want to suffer. They want to be happy. So when we make this interpretation that you just like to suffer, or you're just holding on to, there's some reason. And I think what I find most often when I explore those kind of stuck places is that people are doing it because of guilt. People will hold on to their pain, for instance, because they honestly feel that they don't have the right to be happy, or that they don't have the right to move on. So that there's a reason in there. To say that someone's just wanting to feel sorry for themselves, or that they're just holding, it is an unhelpful interpretation. It doesn't help them understand why they're holding on. For instance, I'll work with a client who grew up with a depressive mother. The mother's always depressed, and whenever he felt cheerful, she kind of punished him because she didn't like all the noise of a cheerful little kid in the house. He learned to feel guilty for being happy. And he learned to feel that by being happy, he was sort of abandoning his mother. So now he's chronically depressed as an adult, not because he's clinging to self-pity, but because he feels guilty about being happy, and because on an unconscious level he feels he's abandoning his mother. See what I mean? There's a reason for it. We hold on to these past suffering for a reason, and I think guilt is one of the common reasons. So I guess what I would say is that where you see this kind of repetition, you need to look deeper. You need to look with compassion and with understanding as to why that person needs to be there, and yourself when you're doing it too, because we all get stuck. We all get stuck in our stuff.
Definitely, and something you've actually written a fair amount about is survival guilt in AIDS, and
yes,
that may relate to what you said also, which is that we feel like it's not okay for us to experience happiness and joy after so many other people we love have suffered and died and are still suffering. What right do I have to not be depressed? So it's not all just self-indulgent. In fact, as you said, very often it has a component of it that's what's that word from Control Mastery? I can't think of it now. Where it's a positive, sacrificial kind of quality.
So separation guilt?
No, it's another term, but it comes from love, really.
Oh, altruistic.
Altruistic motives. Yes. It's often altruistic. It's
Yeah, we'll take care of the people in our lives who've suffered by joining them in their suffering, unconsciously.
Say that again.
We'll take care of the people in our lives who suffered by joining them in their suffering. This is a very big challenge for people, gay men in the AIDS epidemic, for instance, who are survivors, who are either HIV negative or health positive and doing well. When you see all these other people who are sick around you, so a lot of us will find ourselves developing symptoms, getting hypochondriacal, join with them, getting depressed, feeling lethargic and sick all the time, like people who are sick, as a way of joining with them, as a way of not abandoning them in their suffering. It comes from altruism. It's a very touching kind of thing about human nature is that we'll do that to ourselves. We'll create suffering for ourselves so as not to abandon those who are suffering. It's quite beautiful in a way.
But what freedom to know that there's another way to love.
Yeah, there's a better way to do it. Yes.
We have options. We have alternatives.
In studies where they take babies, and when one baby starts crying, the other baby will start crying. And it's like they're on a very empathetic basis in the same area. And that's a trait that human beings have. And it's natural.
Yeah, I've seen films of an 18-month-old baby. She sees her mother crying, and she tries to crawl up to her and wipe her tears away. She's trying to take care of her mother. She's trying to mother her mother at 18 months of age. We're hardwired from birth to be tuned into each other. We're far more altruistic than we think. And the weird thing is that one of the deep secrets that most of us have about ourselves is that we're really selfish, and that if people really knew who we are, they'd know how selfish we really are. And what I find consistently in therapy is the deep secret that people hide from themselves is how much they care, and how much they're affected by the feelings. That's the good news in therapy, is that we really are far more altruistic than we realize.
It seems like an imprint, the altruism or the caring.
It's innate, I think. We're social animals.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I just read this wonderful book called HIV Negative, How the Unaffected Are Affected by AIDS, by William Johnson. I would recommend it highly. It addresses survival guilt and how negative people are so affected by the AIDS crisis. It's an excellent book.
Sure. Yeah. Walter Dead's book is excellent too.
So is mine. I wrote one on the same subject.
One thing that has not been discussed, and I would be interested in your thoughts on it, is I think that there's something extraordinarily remarkable about gay men, particularly now in last 10, 15 years of age, and that is that we have survived. I mean, I came out in the 50s. I have a few friends in their 70s and 80s, but there are not a hell of a lot of old gay men. Long before HIV, because we live hard, we live under an enormous amount of stress, and we just don't last a long time. I kind of see, particularly at the what seems to me an enormous amount of grace, just an enormous amount of grace, that we somehow survived this and survived this awfulness every day of our lives, and somehow keep moving. And I went through a period where most depressive period I've ever been in my life, earlier this year. But I say to myself, it was awful to be there, but somehow it allowed me to get here. I mean, I don't quite understand how that worked. But it seems to me that we ought to give ourselves some positive credit for the fact that we survived when it is so difficult to do. And I think it's peculiar to this group because, again, if you compare us to the Holocaust people, and I think some period of time is this going to be a Holocaust situation. Again, we don't have the Jewish family members to go back to. We talk about the tyranny of other centuries and so on and so forth. Who do we take our grief to except each other? I mean, we get up every morning, it seems to me we get up every morning and sort of recreate ourselves and try to keep moving. And sometimes that's good. Yeah, I'm editorializing rather than asking. But do you have some sense of that? How do you feel about that view of things, that positive side of things?
I think it's very true. I mean, I think there's something very delightful and special about, I think, gay and lesbian people, and some dimensions of that come out in my experience, and many dimensions of it come out in the global loss, not just to AIDS, but the loss of lots of the things that people who are embraced by society to kind of take for granted, and there's just a lot of very beautiful characteristics, including the way we have taken care of each other through the AIDS crisis. not perfectly, but I know many people who've taken care of 2 or 3 or 4 lovers, and they're absolutely emotionally exhausted, and then they do it again. They take care of their friends, and that's just. I say to myself, I don't know if I could do that. And what's ironic is that we're like that for each other, and then we walk out on the street to go meet somebody nice and have a drink, and we treat each other like shit. It's just so schizophrenic, we take care of the sick and dying, basically sacrifice our lives, completely altruistic, and then you go out to meet somebody for love, and that's where that hungry ghost process, the part of us is so afraid. We can't. In the intimacy groups I do, the biggest block is receiving love. People can give it, but receiving love, the vulnerability of being in the position of accepting love, is just terrifying.
Our psychological theories, and I think Marx and my talk both kind of emphasize the wounds and the things that go wrong, and kind of what's in the background, which we don't specifically refer to, of course, is how resilient the human spirit is, that it can survive all these things. Here we are, I mean, I'm 48. I'm the last survivor, pretty much, of the people I expected to grow old with. They all died one by one in the 80s, and it's immense grief from that. But at the same time, I find myself that aging is far different from what I expected it to be. I mean, I thought I'd be, the aging queen. The image of the aging queen is loveless, sexless, pathetic, bitter old. I expected to be that by the time I was. Excuse me, Don. I'm talking.
I know you were doing that.
Oh, you guys. So I'm not too young still. But what I find is that I'm getting more and more passionate as I get older, and more alive. And it's true. It really happens. When you stay with it, and also the sex isn't rare either. That was another thing that I was afraid was going to happen. It's quite. You don't begin to get the hang of how to be a human being in many ways until you're about 45. It takes a long time to figure this thing out. It's worth it. Surviving is worth it. It's worth the effort here.
I wanted to say something too. Not along those lines directly, but I lost a son 9 years ago to cancer. And very frequently people, somebody just did yesterday, was like, that's the most terrible thing that could ever happen to you. And I think about it, I said, I don't know, it's the most terrible thing that ever happened to anybody. It was mine, worst thing. But then, how do you get over it? That's the key question. How do you get over it? I said, well, I don't know if it's any different from how did I get over when I got married, how when he was born, and when I got my PhD. You don't think about getting over wonderful things, the things that you really wanted, the peak moments in your life. You incorporate them. They're nice. We incorporate everything. Nothing ends. Nothing stops. Everything is there that you ever had.
Oh, David. And then you're.
Actually, Don mentioned something. I was thinking about something, and then Don saying it made it clear. I think we were talking about healing before. We use a lot of metaphors for healing. You were talking about the Kubler-Ross style or whatever process. I think of my life and my experience as more like a garden. When you don't heal a garden, you tend it. So sometimes it's over there, there's a difficulty or some issue or something that's dying, so you take care of that. And then over here, there's something else happening maybe a year or two later, and you take care of that. And there's something over here. And it's a continual process, which never ends until you're dead, basically, is what life is about. And it's how you deal with it, what state of mind, what state of consciousness you bring to that. The other thing I wanted to say is important is how we actually deal with pain and suffering, a particular issue. And how something that's so very painful, the loss of hundreds of people who've died of HIV or whatever, like my last mother died in '88, and I still think about him a great deal, obviously. He's very much with me, all that. But the pain of that, sitting, doing meditation practice or any kind of practice, what it does is, one of the things it does is it creates, as you were saying, to a huge amount of space around that pain, around that feeling. So the feeling is still there, and it's still really beautiful in a way. Or beautiful, really painful. But it doesn't, having all that space around it cushions my reactions to it. So I can be really in it completely in one moment, and the next moment I can let it go completely. That much freedom of activity, because I'm no longer caught just by my own ideas about what it is, but the actual experience of it. The experience is different than the talking about it, but the figuring it out. So that's why we practice, to have the experience of seeing through who we think we are. Experience is the most important thing in Buddhism, to me anyway. So that's how practice works. So to define it's wonderful. I think that's important. That's what we were doing this morning. But that's not the end. The end is to be able to see through it. Otherwise, we're just, like you said, we're stuck over and over, looking the same thing out over and over and over. So that's why I would encourage people to sit longer. I think it's helpful. This is from my own perspective, my own practice, but from my own tradition even. But I think doing longer periods of meditation are really helpful for dealing with really big issues. The issues that you just can't see through with a teacher or with someone that you want to, who you have trusting Dharma relationship.
I love that image of the garden. I think that's
I was gone for 2 hours, so mind if I ask what's the topic? Because when I was hearing everybody saying, I had a lot of thoughts, turning up, and I feel like saying something, but I didn't want to say something out of the context. But I heard some comments, and I feel a very strong response to that according to the Dharma I learned. So first I wanted to ask, what has been discussed the past hour?
Obstacles and how to deal with it.
Because I heard a lot of people talking about dealing with pain or starting a healing process, either applying the therapeutic techniques or Buddhist teachings. So that was not.
Yeah, these are two gentlemen who are therapists in our group.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think for me to come here, I have one purpose to express my learning and to get some feedback, see if I'm on the right track, to firm up my belief in Dharma's teachings. And it's not to express my ideas. So if I have made any mistakes, it's only because of me not enlightened enough. And so David, in the last 30 seconds of his talk, he says, to see through it is the end. And I feel I could really relate to that. And in terms of, and also Mark was saying, he has friends who take care of his sick friends, 3 or 4 at the same time, without any complaint, and doing it wholeheartedly. And then when they go out, they treat other people like shit.
Or they feel treated that way, yes.
I think that it's not like shit, but I know what you were trying to say, and I suddenly remember something I read from the book about Buddhist teaching, and that's how we relate to people. And sometimes we say, oh, he's a nice person, he's a good friend, blah blah. Because if we really examine the motive, we say that it's really because they do us good, or they help me, or I benefit from him, and ignoring, and when in fact, according to Buddhist teaching, and all human beings deserve happiness, and when we practice on this path, we need to cultivate love and compassion for all beings. And so the ultimate goal is really to expand that selfish love or passion to all beings. And I think you also said something toward the end of your talk that you found out through your experience that a lot of people really, really care, deep inside. And that's also very true if you look at that in Buddhist teaching. And we do apply this good wishes for others in a very limited scope. And but we have such obscuration in our mind. Our happiness is very limited in that scope. When in fact, when we practice on this path, we can purify our mind and eliminate a lot of obscurations and the disturbing attitudes such as pride and anger, attachment, that kind of things. And after that, can we obtain lasting ultimate happiness? It's not to say that we cannot enjoy the friendship we already have, but for those people that we don't know, they also deserve happiness, just like us and your friend and my friends. So if we all cultivate that kind of consciousness and integrate that being part of Buddhist teaching in our mind, and the gay community will be much better. And because but in this community, probably now a very small fragment of people are practicing Dharma and integrating it into their life. So there's still so much disturbing things we see every day, but then we have to recognize that other people also care just like us, but we don't stand on the same ground, so we don't see each other. And also early in the morning, David was saying, after his opening talk, that we are all interconnected. But we were fortunate enough to come together with our thoughts and feelings. It would be good if other people also experience this and also share the same teachings. So, where am I?
Well, I'm going to use that as a segue. Our next session is to get back into small groups. This has been very intense and wonderful. I'm glad we have it on tape. We can go back and look at and maybe pull some things out that we use. But we'd like to try 5-member groups this time rather than 3-person groups. Let's have a break after. Yeah, we'll have a break first, and then you'll have a chance to get in these number 5 little groups. So we need a quick count off again, 1 to 5. There's enough for 5 groups, and if you will start, Tom.
1.
I want to say thank you for everybody being here today. I think it's been an incredible experience for me. I mean, for me, being brought up in Europe and see what the gay community have been doing, and I may go from Europe. In Europe, I'm from Denmark, and I was always a member of the very left-wing gay, essentially faggot movement. And then I moved to New York, and the only thing I saw was gay people was into sex and drugs and very fancy lifestyles and so on. I said, hey, I come from a community that had a community, and a gay community who was really working on the political levels and pushing very hard. It was shown later on that again, Denmark was the first country in the world to allow gay marriage. And that wasn't because the straight community just gave it to the gay community as a present. That's because the gay community simply fought for it. And then the AIDS crisis came out, certainly the gay men's health crisis came up in New York, and there I certainly saw power that simply blew me away. People who came out of the closet, who started to work very hard, who got politically involved, and so on and so forth.
which really intrigued me to see. And then I moved out here now to San Francisco and be a part of this group here on a very spiritual level. To me, it's beautiful. It's been a beautiful day today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I too want to thank everybody who spoke here and brought this together. I've done a lot of workshops and groups, and I can't ever say that I got as much from one group as I have from this today. I mean, just so much information and so many tools that I feel I needed to hear, and just a real wonderful sense of communication and intimacy, and I hope you do it again and again, whatever format. Relationships are good, but it can encompass a lot of things.
I'm not sure how many people here are on the committee that organized this. There was several ideas brought up in the committee and that we should probably talk about. It might be useful to talk about. One of them being that if people are interested, there could be some sort of ongoing activities with regard to relationships in the Dharma. We weren't sure what that was. People had a lot of suggestions, so I think that's one of the things we might want to talk about. Whether people would like to have ongoing activities of some sort, not so much, maybe support groups. I'm not sure about that, but maybe occasional get-togethers similar to this, maybe not so organized. People who are interested in discussing where they are in their lives as far as Dharma religion, something like that. Once again, I don't have any specific ideas, but I thought just throwing that out there might be valuable.
Yeah, Clint?
Well, along that line, his offerings, this is not quite as deep, I don't know what you use as a workshop like this, but we are offering opportunities for people to get to know each other on a social basis more. We're going to be doing monthly potlucks after the holiday season is over, and we are going to be doing a Thanksgiving together for people who are interested in that. So I would just I would just suggest to people who are interested in community and relationships that come from community that there will be opportunities already in the works in GBF that will help hopefully realize those. Also, as far as workshops go, I would love to see a similar workshop like today on sexuality. I think that would be very interesting. So I just put that idea out. Always a favorite topic.
That's a great. Yeah, I personally agree with you about that one. I think that would be fascinating. On gay sexuality, workshops on gay sexuality. Anybody want to talk about that?
Yes.
Thoughts about it? Anybody want to stop talking about that?
Want to talk about it?
Well, he's already having the social, the social. So. Yes.
Getting back to the gay sexuality, I think a good idea would be maybe read something about how was the sexual life of monks 1,000, 2,000 years ago, and what's happening right what.
Or why not? Why not?
So just to maybe open the windows from other languages, I guess.
And have some knowledge of what happened historically. That's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. One of the things I was thinking about in my small group was what was that? Cultural insecurity. How sometimes I feel, first of all, as a gay person being spiritual, that in and of itself seems somewhat of a transgression. And second, being an American Buddhist. And it seems to me that what we're doing here that's so exciting is we're on the cutting edge of gay Buddhist spirituality. And we're making it up as we go along. And what I've been getting out of today is feeling kind of empowered to do that. It's like we're not sort of cheating if we don't do it the way they do it in Japan or China or the way the monks did it 1,000 years ago. Who cares? Personally, just personal. I would like to, what we're doing here is really exciting because we're creating something that never has existed before, and that it has its own authenticity. I mean, we want to be informed. We want to be dharmic and consistent with the Dharma, but it's ours. To make this ours it's exciting.
Yeah, I really highly recommend the article that was in the newsletter last month, in particular, Enlightenment Needs a Minion, which is about, that's what it's about, and it describes a completely people who are renovating, renewing Buddhism, and exploring it and recommending it. It sounds like he's writing about our group, really. Did he know about it? Did he? Oh.
But we'll have him come and speak, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's incredible. It's about that. And how else can it be? Because, as far as we know, no Buddhists. There have never been gay Buddhists. Certainly not American gay Buddhists organized like this, exploring, what we're doing. So where do we go? So that's right. So we're in the cutting edge. Where do we go from here? And is there does anybody want to, suggest? We've got Clint's the social events that Clint's been talking about. Do we want to have another day-long workshop like this? Do we want to have half-day workshops? Do we want to, let's say we do want to engage sexuality, how do we do
I know for myself, I need time to reflect on, just sort of digest what's happened today. And I might, tomorrow night, I might come up with an idea. But maybe another thing we could do is if anybody, over the next couple of weeks comes up with ideas, or they could let us know. And then the committee could put those together and see whether we have the makings for another one-day relationship workshop. We already have an idea for one focused on sexuality, and maybe we'll have one or two others depending on the feedback that we get, in addition to what comes out this afternoon.
I think that we have, I've been doubly privileged because of the retreat at Bruein Farming, where we did something different this year, where we had talking as well as regular sitting and quiet walking and so on. It seems to me that we are, as Tom said, creating a very special, extraordinary sort of center where we're doing something that none of us have really quite done before. And I also agree with Bob that we need some time for reflection to kind of figure out what it is we did learn today. The thing that I would like to add to the other observations, though, is that I think that the growth and the insight and the intensity comes from committed time together. And I think that probably we need a day to do that. That's really what happened with Bruein Farming. Because we were quiet in the morning of this and that, and then we went on to do something else, those two things fed each other. So I think that what we should do is give it some time and wait for some suggestions. But I really believe that the format of the whole day together is terribly useful. And I think that we eat together, we break into groups together, different people, so on and so forth. It gives a whole lot of life and spirit and interaction, which I'm not sure we can arrive at in any lesser fashion. And I feel enormously grateful as I'm really happy to do when a new experience happens in my life that I never expected them to do.
I'm kind of nervous about this, but I'm very grateful that I could be here today, and I have exchanged some ideas and views with some people, and I benefited a whole lot. And I am pretty new to Buddhism. It's been only 6 months, but the benefits I receive are so profound. Sometimes I can be very excited about it. And I'm really jealous that we have a group in San Francisco, not where I live in San Jose. And I don't have as many chances to come up here to go to the meetings, but when I do, I really benefit a lot in many ways. And I also appreciate people's honesty about how to practice Dharma. in life, and because I'm new, so I'm not very. I can be still immature, so I hope people would put up with me
Alan,
I want to feel connected.
Did you have something to say?
I think it's the community here has been terrific today, and I think that this idea of American Buddhist movement sounds great. But what I think that is more, I see sort of a hunger in the community as a whole, sort of a gays and lesbians have dealt with the AIDS crisis. They've dealt with civil rights and coming out and have come a tremendous way. But I think that there is such sort of pain in the community about the experience that has just never been addressed. And I think it's sort of like the next place to go so that the community can survive and not eat itself alive. And I think that in light of the fact that we've matured to this point, I think it's sort of the next step, and that maybe it's something that American Buddhist movement groups can address, along with other spiritual groups. I think it's I think that the spiritual aspect is probably a great way to sort of to look at it, to come to it from.
Yeah, maybe we're talked out now. Are we ready to? Anybody have anything more to say?
Just the curiosity that I have that we're probably not alone in this as Buddhists, and that maybe in churches and in synagogues or other places and mosques and wherever, other men and women, are also thinking, or addressing in their own way the pain and suffering that Alan addressed. And I don't know what that means to us as we try to formulate our own approach to this. But it's just wondering what's happening in the general spirit.
Well, another, Alan.
Just two practical things. The next time you see an announcement in the newsletter that there's a relationships practice committee meeting, I would hope that anybody here would feel free to come and join that group. It's not a closed group. There's been about 8 of us meeting. We met 3 times, so I expect we'll meet again and continue this practice. So please feel free to join that meeting when you see it. I guess that's. I'm sorry. I should check this with the committee. I've announced it, but I think that committee should be open and inclusive. The other thing, very practical. If anybody feels like they want to undertake a transcribing or help us transcribe these tapes, I think that's a real practical next step to get these tapes on their written form so we can start using the concepts maybe in other ways. So we need some help in transcribing. So if you have any time or patience, it takes patience to take it off the tape and write it down. But that needs to be done. So I'm not sure who's going to do that.
Darren.
Excuse me. In relation to what you said, Alan, at the beginning of today I said that we don't really realize what we have, but I think sometimes it takes something like this to realize it more. And even by transcribing those tapes, by putting them in the newsletter or putting them on the internet or giving them to friends, it's a wonderful support for others' practice, other gay people's practice around the world now, not just in the United States, but around the world. I'm not saying that we are, I'm not emphasizing how important the group is, but I am saying that our practice together, our strong practice together changes others.
and inspires others to practice. That's really how it works. That's how it's worked for many, many centuries. The Buddha just wasn't a teacher by what he said. He was a teacher by how he lived his life. And I think that's what we're doing, to how we live our lives and how we present the Dharma in the world. And I think that's what I'm always impressed by the group. Anytime we come together, the Dharma just sort of like flourishes. So we should be willing to share that, I think, as much as we can, and in various ways that we can. That's one way.
Yeah, I always think of us. We're in San Francisco as gay people. We are the luckiest and most privileged gay people in probably the whole world to live. We live more freely than any other gay people in the world, and that's part of why we're able to come together like this. And if we can share what we're able to accomplish here with people who all over the world, it's really be a great thing. Anybody else? Any other thoughts about anything that was said, or where we want to go from here? David?
Yeah, I'm just saying that it's kind of odd for me to project into the future again about where this is going, because I think our shared experience is just really of being here now, in this, and it's been such a great day. And, I don't even want to think about the future.
Great. Okay.
The future will unroll.
It will unravel. David is going to lead us in a meditation.
This is actually a very ancient practice called loving kindness practice. It's practiced in the Vipassana, the Theravada Vipassana tradition. It's a little, like I said before, I've done it a couple of times. It's a little strange for me to do it being a Zen practitioner, but it's been very helpful for me and in my practice, and I think it's very appropriate for today. So please get comfortable, first of all, and please close your eyes. We want to be quiet for a few minutes. Let go of the talk and discussion of the last couple of hours. Just sit in the silence that can open us to the heart of loving kindness. Breathe naturally and fully from deep within. Relax into this quiet breath. Please enjoy this breath. As our time together comes to a close, we naturally want to bring the mindfulness of today back to our everyday lives. We want to experience loving kindness in each moment as we prepare to leave this place. Please say the following words to yourself. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. As you say these words, picture yourself as a child when your life was more simple, when you didn't question the natural flow of things. Picture this beautiful child immersed in loving kindness.
Think of yourself as you are now, as an adult, and extend the loving kindness to yourself at this very moment. Also, please picture those parts of yourself that you have a difficulty loving. Extend this heart of kindness to your body as it is, to your mind, emotions and thoughts, to confusion or pain that may arise, that come and go, to your whole being. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. Now extend these feelings of loving kindness to those you feel most close to a loved one, or perhaps a special friend, a family member, a partner, maybe someone you've just met, or someone you've known for a long time. It might be a person in GBF, someone in this room. Open your heart to this person. May he or she be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy. Now include someone that you find very attractive in the circle of loving kindness. A person who you'd like to be close to, but are not able to be. Someone you might be intimate with, or want to be intimate with, but cannot for whatever reason. Maybe it's someone you find sexually interesting or exciting, or an individual who you feel is extremely beautiful or good-looking, or whose body is desirable to you. Open your heart of compassion to this person. May he be filled with loving kindness. May he be well. May he be peaceful and at ease. May he be happy. Now expand this open-hearted intention to people that you deal with in your daily life, to co-workers, to neighbors, to people who you encounter at the grocery store, at local shops, to acquaintances, to people you see every day on buses or in the streets. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy. Extend the feelings of loving kindness to those who you find it difficult to deal with. Maybe someone you work with who irritates you, or perhaps someone who has hurt you, a former friend or lover, or a person you've had a recent quarrel with, someone you dislike for whatever reason, who you'd like to avoid. Bring a feeling of open-hearted acceptance to this individual. Picture yourself in this person's place as someone who desires happiness and peace as you do. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy. Now gradually allow your sense of loving kindness to spread to the wider world, to the people in your particular town or your city, people in San Francisco, here in California, to those who live in the United States, to all people in our hemisphere, and lastly to all humans who inhabit our planet. And then spread this kindness to all beings, to animals and to all living creatures, to this beautiful earth, to the forests, deserts, and oceans. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be well. May all beings be peaceful and at ease. May all beings be happy. The loving kindness we give to ourselves and to all those around us is the acknowledgement of the realization of our deep interdependence. We sense this great truth, that we have connections with each other that are more important than life and death. And compassion is the only response to this truth. Gratitude to all of our teachers, past, present, and future, on whose strong shoulders we stand. Gratitude to Buddha, to Dharma, and to Sangha. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.